Let us never tolerate outrageous conspiracy theories. Conspiracy theories. Conspiracy theories.
For we are opposed around the world by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy.
Because it is not the government of the people any longer. Most people do not understand the Illuminati.
A new world order. A world where the rule of law governs the conduct of nations.
Conspiracy theories.
It is a system which has conscripted vast human and material resources into the building of a tightly knit, highly efficient machine that combines military, diplomatic, intelligence, economic, scientific, and political operations.
A new world order.
Its preparations are concealed, not published. Its mistakes are buried, not headlined. Its dissenters are silenced, not praised.
It's the Weekend Vigilante Show.
Hello, listeners, and welcome to the Weekend Vigilante Show. I am your host, Sheila Zilinsky, joined by my co-host, the one, the only, the thorn in Al Gore's side, Dr. Timothy Ball. It's a pleasure to welcome our next guest to the Weekend Vigilante, Doug Haggman, really, and his son. They're an amazing, incredible duo. Doug Haggman is the director of the Northeast Intelligence Network and the CEO of Haggman Investigative Services with his son, Joe. He's got over 20 years' experience performing investigations in private sector for many Fortune 500 companies, is a well-known surveillance specialist, author of Tactical Surveillance, a training manual for investigators who perform covert surveillance assignments. He is just a tremendous wealth of information, fabulous writer. I love Doug's articles. He's been used as operational asset by federal law enforcement, various police departments. I mean, we could go on and on and on. He and his son also have the ever-popular Haggman and Haggman report show. I mean, we love Steve Quayle. We love the guys. Welcome to the program, Doug and Joe.
Well, thank you very much. What an introduction. I feel honored.
Yeah, it's great to be here.
You're very welcome. So, Doug and Joe, we love your work, like I said. You put out some great articles and shows. You have amazing intel and incredible connections. Like I mentioned, you talk frequently to Steve Quayle, and we all know who Steve Quayle is, and if we don't, we better get out of the rock we've been hiding under. But, Doug and Joe, what's your sense of how many people really understand the gravity of what's essentially unfolding around us in this nation? You know, with all the things that you're privy to, and I'm sure it's staggering, what are the most urgent things? It's a funny place to jump into the show, start the show off really, but what is the most, you think, the urgent things to really be sounding the alarm bells on, gentlemen?
Well, if I can just start out, because I'm the senior guy here. I'm Joe's dad, of course, for those who don't know us. So how many people are fully awake? I would say about 14. And no, I'm just...
you might be right, Doug, actually.
and Doug, most statistics are made up on the spot, as you know.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Too few to answer that question. And the other question, however, I think bears some extreme scrutiny here. The two issues that we are most concerned about, at least I'm most concerned about, and I think Joe is as well. I won't speak for him. Number one is our current the orchestrated crisis of our current economic situation, and number two is the global war that is about to take place that people think has been put on the back burner, with Syria. It really hasn't. So there's two issues here: the economic issue and our foreign policy / proxy war with Syria. That's my answer. I don't know if Joe's got anything different.
I would say our economy, what you said, the manipulated economic situation that we have found ourselves in, and also with that, Obamacare is a main part of the economic / privacy problem.
Yes.
And then the wars, the unconstitutional conflicts that we find ourselves into all too often, whether that be directly fighting it or by proxy fighting it, like the Arab Spring, and we will continue to see that through Iran.
Right. That's a really good way to put it.
The question, I agree with you about the orchestrated collapse of the economy. I find it interesting that people on the right, especially, saying that Obama's failing. He isn't. He's achieving exactly what he set out to do, and that's what's remarkable to me.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah, and I don't mean to interrupt. No, you're exactly right. People think that we are in, and see, to me, this is how it's all going to play out. Where we're going to wake up one day, and all of a sudden, everything is going to be upside down in terms of our economy, and they're going to say, well, it happened because of this. It could be a terrorist attack. It could be the situation with Syria. It could be a number of things, any number of things. But you're right. This is exactly what they set out to do, and are doing it. And they're 100% on the money. And people don't understand that this is the game plan.
Yeah, so in a sense, you're really saying, I think I hear you saying, Doug, I mean, this is a really, if we can put it bluntly, a totally orchestrated meltdown. I mean, it's all really, it's really like a complete destruction by stealth, isn't it?
Yeah.
My comment about it, I think it's literally daylight robbery. Because if you read Obama's books and of course I found it amusing that on the birthday of Saul Zilinsky, of course he's passed away, his son on the website praised Obama for following the Zilinsky doctrine to the T. And of course the Zilinsky doctrine is that you deliberately undermine the economy by letting it fail. One, by not doing anything about it, or by bypassing the normal control processes, and then you come in with, and you always have your scapegoat. This is how all these people work. It's like Hitler with the Jews and Idi Amin with the East Asians and so on. And in this case, it's the wealthy and the bankers and Wall Street and all the rest of it. And then you come in and say, oh, you need only government and only my government can save you from this catastrophe. And that's where we're headed with this.
Well, it's the perfect Hegelian dialectic right now on a large scale.
Yeah.
And I think this is exactly what we're going to see. And if we look at the larger picture, who's going to come in? Who's going to step in and take care of or take our place, if you will? And looking at this, I believe, and this is based on my intelligence contacts, a couple of them, I believe that what we're going to see is we're going to see Great Britain really be once again handling us, or we're going to be subservient to the UK in the city of London. So people don't. Would
you agree, Doug and Joe? I mean, I'm just going to I think I tend to be like Steve Quayle. I tend to offend people at times, but I do kind of like to call it what I see it as. And the government really has become this sort of gluttonous, out of control behemoth, gobbling up everything in sight, attempting to, as we're going to talk to Dr. Katherine Albrecht about, of course, we're talking about, the spying, dynamiting, nanotechnologies, you name it. I mean, tracking us, controlling us. But think about, they're exerting this full spectrum dominance over everyone's lives. They have this insatiable hunger to have complete control, like I said, spy on, data mine, track, control. Now they want to feel our private parts at airports, before we board a plane. That's if we can even get on a plane, if we're not issued proper ID. I mean, no matter what politicians we send to D.C., it really just seems to get worse and worse. And, I mean, anyone who still believes, really, Doug and Joe, that we live in the land of the free, I think they're completely delusional, quite frankly. We've got this sort of out-of-control, mafia-style government gone mad. We've got this complete draconian, Gestapo, Stasi police state who's just days ago, as you guys talked about this, I believe, on one of your shows, a woman in an Infinity with a toddler, takes the wrong turn, and these mindless minions just blast her with, mowed her down with how many rounds, this dental hygienist in broad daylight, and D.C. applauds us? I mean, Thomas Jefferson really said it best. He said all tyranny needs to gain a foothold is for people of good conscience to remain silent. And, there's this illusion of normalcy, I think, that's now just completely in the rearview mirror with regards to any former life in the U.S. And so, Doug and Joe, what is it? I mean, there's this this sort of, why have people remained silent? What happened to this once great country? And how do we address this apathy in our country when our forefathers would be shooting by now?
What you said there, the apathy in our country, that is the biggest problem. In the Bible Jesus talks about being either hot or cold, but because you are lukewarm, he spews you out of his mouth. Well, that is what we have. We have a country, due to the what has been created, this comfort zone. We all seem to be distracted by our favorite football team or whatever little trinkets that we can get our hands on that is above and beyond what is, and it would be considered needs for living. And people get distracted by these, and they're found in their own little bubbles. And once you get to that point where you don't depend on other people in society, you don't depend on, your family really, even for conversation. People have become so electronically enslaved that, instead of walking across the street, say they live across the street from their mother's house to say hi, they're going to jump on Facebook or send an email instead. So we have this disconnect, this cognitive disconnect between what is real reality in the U.S. versus what is reality in the rest of the world. And then that disconnect is fueled by people getting things that they want that distracts them from what is important. So we have just a nation of self-serving, selfish people that, until it's at their front door, aren't going to understand the real problems of what's going on in our world.
Well, it's funny, Joe, that you mentioned these trinket distractions and the latest gadgets, because you really do, pardon the phrase, but you've got this stupefied sort of shoulder-shrugging dystopia, these kind of zombified, mindless minions walking around in a trance while Rome burns around them. And really our nation, I think Doug would agree with this, has become these sort of passive sheeple while we witness the systematic slaughter of every freedom and liberty. And, forget the armchair patriots, but what I want to ask you guys, you're Christians, you have your thumb in the pulse of what's going on. Where are these men of God, the men from the pulpit, instead of these silent devil apostates? Why aren't these guys up in those pulpits screaming bloody murder? These guys better grab a backbone, not a wishbone, because when I look at the church of the Old Testament and the New Testament, the New Testament guys, they didn't have these stately buildings, they didn't have paid evangelists or a lot of money, and they couldn't get on TV and beg, but I tell you what they did do, they turned the world upside down. What happened to that spirit? Are we at the Rubicon of, no return here, Doug and Joe, do you think?
That's a great question. It reminds me of when you're in an aircraft and you're flying across, or a long time ago, you're flying across the Atlantic. There's a point called a point of no return, where you've expended enough fuel where you can't turn back, so you've got to continue on to your destination or some another location ahead of you, and that's where we're at. I think that we have at this point there are not enough Catholic, Christian, Baptist, Presbyterian, whatever denomination. From the pulpit, there's no one is talking, and there's a fear factor there, I believe, and there's also this. And I talked to someone here this week. I couldn't believe it, because what came out of this individual's mouth was, "It can't happen here. It's not going to happen here." So. There's that disconnect, as Joe was talking about. So what we've got to do is really scream louder, shout louder. Not, of course, I'm speaking metaphorically here, but really educate the people even more. And I think the alternative or new media, your radio shows like yours and ours, hopefully, and others, I think we made a difference. I think we set back, for example, the time frame, the globalist time frame for what was going to take place in Syria. So if we can do it with Syria, we can do it here domestically. But it's just going to require a lot more, because we are a captured operation. The country has been captured, ladies and gentlemen, and you've got to understand that. We are captured from within.
Well, I think it's interesting you guys mentioned Syria, just real quick, Tim, because, I mean, it was really interesting. I caught one of your shows recently. I mean, I catch your show all the time, and I found it fascinating when the guerrilla economist did a really good analogy about this bus going. I mean, of course, I'll post that link on our page for people to listen to, but there was a bus, kind of already went over the cliff. It was really interesting because you're talking about sort of a Cyprus-style event taking place, or what would that look like? But Syria really was kind of the key detonator in this analogy, and yet, they were kind of laying the central final little plots out, but they kind of did do you think they got a little sidetracked with this whole Obama sort of getting called on? We sort of put the alternative media, the new media, whatever you want to call us, maybe put a little thwart in his plans. Do you think that's, part of this bigger picture as to what's happening too as well, Doug and Joe?
Yeah, you know what? I've had the pleasure of speaking with a number of Fox News reporters, in fact, names that we'd all know. And I spoke with one who was in contact with my source at one of the agencies where I get my information from, and the Fox. There's a couple of angles here I just want to lay out. Number one, Fox News had the precise information that we had with regard to Benghazi and how it related to Syria on 4 days after it happened. Actually, 3 days after it happened. They refused to run it because the upper echelon of Fox said, no, it's too edgy. We're not going to run it. Yet they are running most of it now, which is too little too late as far as I'm concerned. Yeah. And the Fox News reporter that I've been speaking with has been muzzled pretty much.
Wow.
And very unhappy. Look, this serious situation, Benghazi, it all connects together. It is a serious situation, magnitudes so much bigger than Fast and Furious. Although Fast and Furious is huge, Benghazi is by orders of magnitude much bigger. And if people really knew the truth about Benghazi, and one of the real issues about Benghazi is the 18 and a half missing hours. It's not 3 hours, it's not 8 hours, it's 18 and a half missing hours, much like the Watergate tapes of Barack Hussein Obama. And if people knew what he was doing, exactly who he was with on that night, and what he was doing, there would be riots in the streets tomorrow.
Do you think there would be riots? I mean, is there anything that would really make this country riot right now, aside from maybe, contrived food and water shortages? I mean, what is it going to take to snap these people out of this trance, Doug and Joe?
Really, it's going to cost a lot of people the very thing that we're trying to prevent them from losing. It's going to cost them their life, as it's going to be too late by the time so many realize that it's too late for them to start trying to save up food and water and supplies. It's too late for them. You're muted there.
You're right, Joe.
Sorry about that.
Tim, you're the expert on water. Weigh in on that.
Well, of course, water has been the main issue for the Club of Rome from the 1960s. And they're already, they talked about peak oil when they were using CO2 and the energy to shut down the world's economies and take control. They're already talking about peak water. And there are campaigns starting around the world to focus on water. It's a phony issue, just like the CO2 one was. But of course, you don't need. It doesn't matter. As the founder or co-founder of Greenpeace said, the facts don't matter. It's what people believe is the truth that is all that matters. But I wanted to ask a couple of questions. One is they seem to have played and silence the church, particularly the church leaders, which Sheila was asking about, the ACLU playing up this church and state thing all the time, so that they've intimidated church leaders from even stepping forward. That's one question I want to ask about. But just to give you some senses of where I'm coming from with this, over the last couple of years, I've been approached by congregations For example, a woman who publishes a congregational magazine for Scottish Catholics, and that's a challenge for you right there, but they were outraged that their bishop ordered the priest to get in the pulpit and preach about global warming. And so they asked me to write an article that they could put in their journal to say, no, here's what they're not telling you. Here's the other side of the story. The other story that I want to relate, and I think that if you can get to the congregations, that's part of my point, is that a large Southern Baptist group were very tired of what their children were getting in the schools, and they decided that they would offer the alternate message to the environmental nonsense they were getting in school in their Sunday Bible schools. So I ended up making a series of videotapes that they were showing to the children in the Bible schools on Sunday. So I think the congregations are there. The problem is, as Sheena is focusing, is on the leaders. So would you comment on a couple of those points?
Well, yeah, and by the way, I'm a great fan of your work, Dr. Ball, and both of you. I'm a great fan of you both, by the way.
Thank you.
I just want to say that. First of all, I think what we've got here is we're at the kind of nearing the top of the parabolic curve, if you will, with respect to the pressure being placed on the religious, on the clergy. Okay. Now, for example, we look at what happened with, and I know this is not directly answering your question, but we look at what happened with the shutdown and the Catholic priests. I think 50 of them were prohibited from saying Mass.
Right.
Okay, recently. Now, what's the response to that? If one gets up, and I use this analogy with the TSA, if one gets up and says Mass, they're going to get arrested or get court-martialed, I should say. If 2 or 3 get up, there's going to be an event, and the press might be there. If they all get up and say, hell no, not now, not here, not with me, what are they going to do? See, this is what we need to do, and this is where we're falling short. There's no leadership to this.
No.
There's no cohesiveness to this. And if everyone in an airport, and I use this all the time, if everyone in an airport said, you know what, you're not going to touch me, you're not going to touch my wife, you're not going to touch my daughter, you're not going to do any of this, if everyone did that and stood up for what was right, then they would back down, and they have in the past. And this applies to just about everything that we're talking about, but we don't have the cohesiveness here. But what are they afraid of? The IRS tax status. They're looking to these mega churches, by the way, who are just in it for. I'm not going to give a blanket statement, but there's a lot of people
money,
who are
mostly.
the money. Yeah, you're right, Joe. I mean,
and that's 501(c)(3), Doug and Joe.
Right, exactly. We can't lose that. Baloney.
These churches have been infiltrated, much like the educational system of America, and to dumb down the gospel, only preaching, I guess you say universally accepted teachings of the gospel. They stay away from revelations. They stay away from end-time prophecies. And this is not the news we're talking about. This is the churches where we go to learn about the Lord and what His plan for the world is through the Scriptures. And when half the Scriptures aren't even touched upon in the churches, it's a huge problem. And this stems back from, I think, one part is the getting scared, the preachers getting scared by this tax status or by other influences, and the second is an infiltration of people to make sure that the church, sticks to a certain agenda of teaching.
Well, Doug and Joe, my grandfather took a bullet when they stormed the beaches of Normandy, and I always say, of course, our gritty forefathers would be shooting by now. But, it's funny you just mentioned 501(c). You've touched on really good points about watered down, sort of a dumbed down, half-truth gospel. You've got sort of these big mega churches, and you've got these, like I say, these silent devils up in the pulpit, with everybody's feet propped up, drinking their soy lattes and listening about 5 ways to become Joel Osteen. You've got this this, craziness, and you see this complete orchestrated demolition of everything this country was founded on, good Christians, gritty Christians, and yet Christians now are getting court-martialed for sharing their faith. You've got this government shutdown, this perfect distraction, of course, this complete, what just horrifies me and why I talked about my grandfather storming those beaches is because you've got this complete vilification of our veterans, which is sickening. You've seen the veterans being arrested at the memorial. Is that what we've become now? We're arresting our veterans now and we're locking up our Christians. What is going on in this nation, fellas?
Metrosexuals, the too many of them.
Yep.
I'll tell you something. You've got no
Doug,
one.
it's funny. I want to just jump in because it's so funny. You just said the most beautiful segue, and I wasn't going to say this, but speaking of testosterone, are we too hopped up on big pharma, leaching plastics and GMOs that testosterone's gone in the average man? Because men are being even portrayed on TV by these little effeminate, wimpy males wearing their skinny jeans and their scarves, drinking their little lattes, listening to the women, and don't dare question the women, by the way. I mean, what is happening with our males?
Well, I'll tell you, I'm glad I went to the shooting range today because it did get some steam off me, okay? But, exactly. We've gone. Is this some sort of tolerance? The word tolerance has been really infused into our society, and I've got to tell you that people mistake tolerance of evil for tolerance of others, and boy, I don't want to go on a rant. I really don't. It's just we've been. You're onto something. I think with big pharma. I think with the slow kill process, and in so doing, also the dumbing down and taking.
Can I give you an example of that in words?
Sure.
It used to be that the word discriminate meant you had taste and sense and common sense. Now it's become a totally negative thing. That you're not allowed to discriminate. Well, that's wrong. But you know what's interesting? Other people who know what's being done in North America, particularly with Obama, have been making comments about this. I mean, that American capitalism is in trouble when Putin warns about what are you doing? Where are you going? Right? But the other one that, and I had a long debate at a conference where I spoke about this. Osama bin Laden said the West has lost its moral direction. And you know what? He was absolutely right.
Exactly.
But to say that, of course, people get up in arms. And I said, no, don't mistake me. I'm not saying that I want his moral direction because it's no good either. But in terms of identifying the problem with the West, he's right on the money.
You're right.
Yeah.
No, I didn't mean to cut you off. Yeah, you're exactly right. And there's really little to add to that except, I mean, when you start agreeing with Vladimir Putin and Osama bin Laden, you know that there's something wrong. But we have, in my view at least, we have got an effeminate bisexual Muslim, if not in fully Muslim, certainly a cultural Muslim man in office, and he's elevated to this messiah status. And as hard as it is for people to understand, we are supposed to look up to this man who, by the way, has got a dubious. People laughed in 2008 about his eligibility status. Well, I still have yet to see anything that would tell me that he's constitutionally eligible.
Wait a minute, Doug. You're not a birther, are you?
No. I am a constitutionalist, if you will. But I guess birther would.
He started the birther movement.
But
don't you find it interesting very quickly? Don't you find it interesting though? As soon as you start to challenge, where's the birth certificate? What's going on here? You ask questions. We've become so politically correct that the average person can't even ask questions because you're a tinfoil hat wearing kook, you're a conspiracy theorist. We've had this conversation before Doug, Joe, and Tim, and it's just, I mean, Tim and I say this all the time. I mean, they think we're the kooks, but it's ironic because this stuff's coming out of their mouths, not us saying it. It's typically coming out of the Henry Kissingers, the Soros, the Rockefellers, the Rothschilds. I mean, this is spooky stuff going on. And yet,
Sheila, this is part of the orchestration. You go and read Zilinsky. This is in his manual. What you do is as soon as you want to marginalize a group, you give them a PR name like birther, like conspiracy theorist, like global warming skeptic, like climate change denier with all the Holocaust connotations.
Yeah.
And of course that then, regardless of what that person
you make
is
it a pejorative.
Yeah, the person that's hearing or going to hear this person is already starting with a negative ear, and that's what they want. So immediately you ask a question about any of Obama's documentation, whether it's a birth certificate or not, you're immediately a birther and marginalized. That is planned. That is part of the game. That's how it's played, and it's really frightening. But one of the things that we need to do is start identifying the techniques by which they spin, by which they manipulate the population. And I remember years ago I wrote an article about how to identify, the signals, the words, the phrasing by which you're being manipulated in environmental papers. And, of course, the first one is you look at all of the conditional words of, it could, it may. It's never absolute or it will. It's always possibly, so that they can always bail out when they're wrong, but it doesn't matter because they've achieved their goal. So we need that exercise in how to identify what they're doing and how they're doing it, and then work on that.
I totally agree with you on that, and it's interesting how the pejorative words that are being used.
Al Gore recently said it about climate deniers, man-made global warming deniers were homophobes and racist, and that's what you're talking about with the marginalization. And as you said, it's part of the plan. It's part of the you call it the game plan for for the administration. They are and with the veterans, it's horrifying to see what they're doing to the veterans. Not even even before this shutdown. Look at how they're labeling them, marginalizing them when they come home. Then you see certain instances where they pop up in the news, saying that, these veterans with post-stress syndrome are killing people and doing this and that.
Disorder,
and now
they're mentally
they're being locked out.
Yeah, they're turning the message around now to if you're a veteran, then you're a warmongerer.
Yeah.
Right? I saw this in England after the war, and they wanted to get rid of Churchill. And I remember hearing my father talking about, Churchill, he's just a warmonger. Well, he saved your country, for crying out loud, right? But you had to marginalize him. Why? Because what followed Churchill, and they actually got him thrown out of office within 3 months of the end of the war. And who replaced him? A socialist by the name of Clement Attlee, who came in and took over all of the government. That's where the socialized medicine, the socialized education began. But you had to marginalize the people that had bought you your freedom, and that's what they're doing with the veterans now. If you volunteered to go off to war to fight for your country, you're clearly a warmonger, and therefore you shouldn't be listened to. And that's the game that they're playing in the United States right now.
Absolutely, and it's scary to see the militarization of the domestic police force here from the government agencies like Homeland Security, and that's okay. But don't you dare return home from battle because you can't have your guns back. You got to see a psychiatrist, and we don't know if we can trust you to.
Well, speaking of guns, Joe, and I'd really like Doug and Joe to weigh in on this. Now you've got gun grabbing Feinstein. She wants to shut down alternative media because this bought and paid for spin doctoring propaganda peddling lamestream media churns out and spoon feeds us a steady diet of lies. I mean, can you believe that she is now working on, of course you got Obama working on another executive order to shut down the internet. I mean, do you, systematically we're just getting hit on every side, if we're not being, like Doug said earlier, soft killed, we've got all these other something's in the front and then something's in the back. I mean, we're just systematically being absolutely slaughtered here. I mean, weigh in on that, Doug and Joe.
Well, it's as Dr. Ball said, it's the Alinsky tactics, and I think that this is the Saul Alinsky playbook to a T, but on steroids. Because I really believe that they've got a certain day planner agenda. They want to get certain things done by a certain time. Now, one thing I'm going to throw out here that is kind of on my mind, and it's kind of it almost seemed like a non sequitur, but nonetheless, I want to mention this. You look at Obama, you look at everything that's taking place, all of these certain agendas that are in play, the gun control, the health care. Think, and the problem I see is people aren't thinking big enough. If Obama, for example, is, and I believe he is, a puppet of the global power elite, and I do believe they exist. I mean, Carol Quigley wrote a book about it back in the 1,300-page book. Anyway, I really believe that these people are psychopaths, they're sociopaths, and I'm looking at Obama as what happens if and when he runs out, or he becomes really a detriment rather than an asset to the cause, to the agenda. And I'm looking at that perhaps as a current condition.
One sign of that, by the way, Doug, was that before the last election, Soros, who of course has been one of the major funders of all of this, and that on the global scale, and of the Obama election through Acorn and all those other things, but Soros announced that he was withdrawing support for Obama because, as you said, he was handpicked. He was the just dark enough African American to be acceptable, and of course Alan Keyes, who always runs for president, said he wasn't black enough. And only a black African could say that. But Soros saw this sociopathy or narcissism of Obama becoming a danger. Because they thought Obama would only be in there for one term, and then suddenly Obama decided, flying on Air Force One and all the rest of it, he really liked that, and he liked the power trip that he was on, and so Soros saw that problem. I think that there's got to be an awful lot of Democrats that are extremely uncomfortable with the situation right now. But the difficulty with that is that the left, and I would include the Democrats in that, they always win by party above self. That the objective is more important than the individual, whereas on the right, it's the individual. That's what the Founding Fathers was all about: the individual, the personal responsibility, and so on. And just to put it in some perspective, that this isn't just to the U.S. that they've got the problem. A Conservative Party president here in Canada once said that the problem with the Conservatives is they're such individual cusses that when an election's called, they draw their wagons into a circle and shoot inwards. And we see exactly that going on now with the Republicans and the Conservatives, and of course that being exploited by Obama and the left. But yeah, I think you're onto something, Doug. By the way, I've said for some time that a democracy is an ideal environment for a sociopath to seize power and to take over.
Megalomaniacs, yeah.
But what would happen, though? I mean, if we take that one step further, what would happen to for example, the anti-gun agenda here in the United States, if all of a sudden president, and I use that term loosely, Barack Hussein Obama became Saint Barack Hussein Obama at the hand of some allegedly crazed right-wing gun-toting Tea Party member patriot?
Yeah.
How quickly would certain agendas be, forced down our throats? That's what scares me, by the way. I just wanted to say that.
Well, no, I agree. But, there's another side to this. People think that you need to get 50+1 of the population to vote for you. You don't. Because it never 100% turns out. That's why Australia now made it law that everybody has to vote. You have to vote by law. and let alone have an ID card to vote. So if you're lucky, you get 60%. Well, then you draw half of that. So now you only have to get 1/3 of the population. And what Obama's doing, for a while there, he was reducing the bureaucracy, but now they're hiring again like mad. When you look at the increase of the IRS to handle the hospital Obamacare, well, Gordon Brown did this in Britain. I mean, he increased the civil service, as they call it over there, the bureaucracy, by 3 million people in his term as prime minister. Well, of course, you're then going to get their votes, and when that percentage of 3 million can make a difference in a complete election. So these are some of the statistics people need to be thinking about, that it isn't just getting 50 plus 1. It's far less than that, and you can have control, and that's what's going on.
Good point. Yeah, exactly. And this is stuff that we need to be thinking about here. Yeah. You're right on the money with this.
Well, think about the last election. What got Obama in was the 3 million Republicans that didn't go vote.
That's very true.
Not to mention 200% turnout in Ohio and some other places across the country.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Well, where do we go? How do we? What do we promote? I mean, the public generally are there. When you look at the polls, I mean, this is why it stunned me with the last election of Obama, where all the polls were showing that it was going to be Republican to get in and Romney was going to win and so on. Now we can allow for the fact that the Tea Party Republicans didn't want Romney, but beyond that, how do you get to those small C conservative voters?
Well, I would have to say that, in my opinion, it's over for the voting booth, really. In the last election, as you said, it shocked me too to see all the even if you don't even trust polls, to give them a margin of error of plus or minus 10, all the Romney support, the polls going into the election, even back to the caucuses, when Ron Paul was polling very high at all the caucuses, and then that was taken away from him. The same thing happened with Romney at the election. I did not expect Obama to win. I was shocked when he did, and we know that through the electronic polling places, it's computerized now, so we don't get an accurate count regardless. Now, I'm not saying give up, but I am saying it's time to look aside from the Democrat or Republican Party for our answers. We need to look to each other. We need to be accountable ourselves and hold our local representatives accountable. And the only way we can affect change is through starting locally and going bigger from there.
Well, I agree with that. I've argued for a long time that that the only role of the federal government really is defense. And that everything, and the founding fathers with putting in power in the states. I like, by the way, Mark Levin's book about state power and impeaching the president through the states. But that really leads me to another question. Are you, through your sources, aware of anybody that has itemized all of the breaches of the Constitution that Obama has created? And if somebody was to
that would
produce
take years and years and years.
Well, no, but even if you got half of it and just say, look, here's the man literally defying the law in executive orders, in what he's done with the EPA, using the administrative regulations to rule by the bureaucracy, and all of these other things, that somebody should start itemizing those.
Yeah, but to what end? Because you've got an attorney general. We've got an attorney general here that's been in contempt of Congress and has failed to turn over documentation, yet gets invited back and is treated like a royalty when in fact he should be in cuffs and doing the perp walk. We've got seriously, we don't have we are losing. I mean, what's the last really a firewall between between a constitutional Republican tyranny is the judiciary, and our judiciary has been compromised.
Yeah.
So now what? Can we affect change through voting? Can we affect change? If people think that they're going to get their man in and suddenly everything's going to be okay, it's not going to be okay. I believe that we've got, and I'm not promoting this, but the only thing I can see coming here is a great reset, and that reset is not going to be through the voting booth. I don't know, honestly, I don't know how, but the people I've been talking with, for example, I've got one contacted within the Central Intelligence Agency who understands what's going on and has also in DHS. DHS is a whole different animal, by the way. But that said, there are people who are saying internally here, we're not going to do this. We're not going to be a part of this. Now, that seems to be that gives me hope. That gives me a lot of hope.
We've seen in Colorado where individual counties that are voting to secede, and there's been recalls there. I know Texas has long harbored these thoughts. Is that another possibility that the union breaks down simply because various groups secede from it?
Oh, sure. I think that would be one way to go. Now
it'd have to be a more unified action. I don't see the federal government letting that happen in small pieces here or there. I think they would exert control at that point.
Yeah.
Well, Doug and Joe and Tim, you've sort of got this quintessential kind of diversion, how convenient, too, is this October 17th deadline's looming. You kind of got this smoke screen government shutdown going. Talk a little bit about that because, I think the people in the general public were, people have to remember the health care law isn't directly tied to funding the government, but it's being used as a bargaining chip, and then you've got all these Republicans. You've got Ted Cruz of Texas kind of, he's saying he believes the president's signature to this domestic policy achievement is so bad for the country that it's worth disrupting the government funding to undercut it. You've got some pretty bold statements coming out here, but do you see this all as just smoke and mirrors? Weigh in on that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's one big magic show. We are in the audience. The magician's fog is obscuring the evil machinations of the magician and the assistants. And while we're focused on the assistants, the very pretty, buxom assistants that are integrating with the audience, of course, the real happenings are taking place elsewhere, where our gaze is not, and this is what's happening
analogy.
Here.
Very nice analogy.
This is it. Frankly, and people have to understand that. I believe people have to understand that there is no more political paradigm that we're used to. The Republican and Democrat, they're all in on this together.
Okay. One of the interesting issues, if you look at Egypt right now, and I want to make an analogy with the military there trying to arbitrate democracy and deposing Morsi because it was essentially a fiefdom, a Muslim fiefdom. But what would the military role be in the U.S.? And do you think that the arming of all of these government agencies, like we saw that the Homeland Security buying up all of the bullets, I think there were billions of bullets, is this part of an internal police force to counteract the army to protect the government?
I believe that to be the case, Joe.
Yeah, I think counteracting the army, that would be a little dicey, but we see how far our army is spread out across the world. But I see more an effect of this army being put together.
Can I just interrupt really quickly? Sorry. Because we're approaching the top of the hour, I've got Dr. Katherine Albrecht coming on in a couple minutes. Let me ask you this, Doug and Joe. Can you stay on with us for about 15 more minutes? I know you guys have got a show, but can you jump in as we bring in our most favorite beautiful patriot, Dr. Katherine Albrecht? Can we do that?
Oh, we'd be humbled, and we'll be in the background, sure. We can stay on for about 15 minutes. That'd be great.
Yeah, and absolutely. This is very casual. Feel free for everybody to weigh in. But what I'm just going to quickly do, guys, is I'm going to jump on a quick commercial. Just hang tight with us, and we'll be back right after the break.
Get ready for the epic new documentary adventure ride of your life. Shade the motion picture. Up you into the globalist domain and embellish and burn this film.
Nothing in this world works the way you think it does. Nothing. Governments do not operate the way you think they do. Banks do not do what you think they do. The police department is not here for what you think it is. Nothing in your world works the way you think it does.
We have to let them know that their world government has been identified, and they thought they'd include the world economy, bring in a worldwide police state, but instead it's going to bring them down.
You have to stand up, speak up, speak out.
Shade the Motion Picture. Order your copy of the DVD today at shadethemotionpicture.com.
Well, we're back, and guess what, everyone? We have long been anticipating this guest. I really kind of call her the Doctor of Digital Privacy. She's an amazing, beautiful woman, and I'm just going to kind of go over her bio again for people that didn't listen at the beginning of the show. I mean, it's such an impressive bio. I could spend all day talking about just, for 3 hours. You're a Harvard grad. You're a popular and sought-after media commentator whose views have been featured in almost 3,000 radio, television, and print stories. You're a dynamic radio personality with a syndicated show whose passion for truth and freedom has earned you very devoted accolades. You've authored a bunch of books, including my favorite, I've read this and it's amazing, the award-winning bestseller Spy Chips, how major corporations and government plan to track your every move with RFID. There's a handle. Your efforts have literally brought major corporations to their knees, forcing them to really revisit their plans to track and monitor the public. You've really spearheaded the worldwide movement against RFID tracking and implant technologies. I could go on and on and on. Katherine Albrecht, welcome to the program.
Oh, Sheila, it's such a delight to be on your show tonight. Thanks so much for inviting me.
And Haggman and Haggman are joining us, too, so we've got just a completely great little roundtable discussion here until they go on their show. So, again, I'd like to introduce you to Doug and his son, Joe Haggman.
Hey, gentlemen, it's great to be on the air with you together.
Wow. We're very humbled to be in such great company, and thank you. That's all I can say.
Good evening.
Well, good evening. Yeah, so much to talk about. There's so much going on lately, isn't there? It's quite a time.
So, Katherine, I mean, barely a day goes by where you're not turning on the TV or opening a newspaper. Like I said in the beginning of the show, we're not hearing about some big brother intrusion. We're being spied on, recorded, watched, data mined, tracked, and now chipped. And I said to Tim earlier, I mean, George Orwell's 1984 is reading more like a newspaper than it is a dystopian novel written in the 1940s. And it seems the establishment wants to be in every area of our life. Give our listeners, Katherine, again, I call you the Doctor of Digital Privacy, and I think that's clearly not even touching what you've done here. But give our listeners an overview, a 101, if you will, on RFID, what it is, what it's for, how it's being used, who's using it, and why people should be very concerned about this.
Well, thank you. And there really are a couple of places a couple of different arenas that our privacy is being attacked from. And one of them is physical privacy. The other one is online or digital information privacy. And I've really taken kind of a two-pronged approach to deal with those. The online privacy issues, of course, that's Google, that's the NSA, that's PRISM, that's Microsoft and Yahoo and AOL and Bing and all these other corporations that are spying on us. And that's really broken in the news since June, when Edward Snowden came out and made his revelations. And, of course, I've been working, your listeners may be aware of the StartPage.com search engine that I helped to create in 2009 to create a private way for people to search the Internet and to access websites without being watched with full encryption. We've got a new email program coming out at the beginning of next year, too, called StartMail, that will be dealing with the fact that it's virtually impossible to send an email nowadays without that being intercepted and read by the NSA, too. So that's the digital half of things, and that's the part that I think when you say you turn on the television or you open the newspaper, you open a web browser, and the first thing you see are all of these digital privacy stories. There is a whole other arena of our privacy that's being invaded in the physical realm. And just to give you kind of a brief tour of that, that's everything from RFID tags in driver's licenses, in consumer products, smart meters on the sides of homes, facial recognition technology being placed into cameras, really anything in the physical world that is monitoring not what you do when you're on the computer, where I think most of us have some kind of a sense, hey, if I'm on the computer, I better be careful what I click on and where I go because somebody's probably watching. But we don't have that sense in our own homes. We don't have that sense as we walk down the street or as we go for a walk in the woods. And perhaps that we need to hang on to the degree of privacy that we do have in the physical world. So back in 2003, actually, I'll go back even further. Back in 1999, I first became aware of the whole privacy issue because of the frequent shopper cards that were being issued to people in grocery stores. And what I learned, my local Safeway supermarket in California was rolling out its brand new Safeway Club card. And something about it didn't seem right. I just had a bad feeling. I said, wait a minute. You're telling me that if I use this club card, I'll be able to get sales, but I've always been able to walk into Safeway, and certain things have always been on sale. What's the catch? Why now do I need a card to get the same sales I've always gotten? And so my kind of BS meter went up. And I started doing a little poking around, and I found that these frequent shopper programs were really shopper and food registration programs. And to put that in perspective, there was a company called Catalina Marketing that had some PR folks who were really geniuses, and they were boasting in their own internal communications in their own industry publications about how with all the rollout of all the supermarket frequent shopper cards and club cards and discount cards and all the rest, that they had done such an effective PR campaign that none of the reporters writing about them ever once brought up the privacy issues or the data collection issues. And that they were boasting that the media had bought hook, line, and sinker their story, which is this was a loyalty card designed to reward people, to give them discounts, and it was all perks and all pluses and no minuses. When I dug a little bit deeper and, of course, read all these industry publications, they were really laughing at the public and at the reporters for not seeing the true intent of these cards, which were introduced pretty much from the mid-1990s up until today, where now you've got more than 90% of American households having at least one of them. So it's pretty incredible how quickly they did that. But people don't realize that the purpose of the card is not to reward you or to give you a discount. The purpose of the card is to register what you buy. And so when you scan the card and you make a purchase, you've got all your stuff there on the conveyor belt that you're purchasing, and you scan your frequent shopper card, they make a note of every individual object that you've bought. They know if you have kids, and if you do, how old they are, because they knew when you were buying baby food, and they know if you have a cat or a dog or hemorrhoids or dandruff, or if you drink wine, or if you eat a lot of fatty foods. Of course, they're very interested in that. If you eat a lot of green leafy vegetables, they're interested in that too. Nowadays, what's happened in the last 10 years is that those card programs have become incredibly sophisticated because now there are databases, now that data storage is so inexpensive, there are databases that have detailed breakdowns of every single product you can purchase in the supermarket based on number of grams of fat, number of grams of salt, number of grams of, units of vitamin E, whatever. And when you make a purchase now, they don't just say, oh, well, there's a thing of orange juice and a thing of Häagen-Dazs and a thing of, a pound of ground beef. Now they actually break it down and analyze it based on the number of people in your household, based on the number of calories in the things you bought, how often you shop, how much you spend. It's a total science, and it's a horrifying thing, especially because now you've got other countries openly talking about using those records, now that everybody's gotten used to them and everybody participates in these programs, using those records as part of their national health programs. So I believe that we're going to come to a point, it's just like gun registration. You talk to Second Amendment advocates, and they will tell you, as well any person with common sense, that the reason the government wants to register your guns is because eventually they want to take your guns away. Registering something gives the government the ability to monitor and ultimately control the thing that's being registered. And what people don't realize in all the concern about gun registration is that we have in this country currently a very well-developed and mature system of food registration. And once you understand that, and then you understand what it is that Obamacare is going to be doing, which is causing me to suddenly start caring whether you're eating nothing but Häagen-Dazs and donuts, Whereas today I could care less. Do whatever you want to do. You want to make yourself sick, go ahead. But once I'm paying for your health care, it then becomes an issue of national interest, whether you're eating nothing but Haagen-Dazs and donuts. And at that point, these cards, I believe, are going to be used as ration cards. I believe they actually will be used to prevent you from purchasing more than your allotted share of fill in the blank. And we've set this up. You know, we've participated as a nation, I think, unknowingly. I did my Harvard dissertation on this topic. I interviewed people at supermarkets around the country, hundreds of them, and I asked them, why do you think your supermarket offers this card? And only 25% of people were able to say, after being prompted and even provided with the knowledge, only 25% of people were able to say that it was because they wanted to monitor what you buy. So that means 3 out of 4 Americans don't even know that when they scan the card, a record is being made of their purchases. It sounds mind-blowing, but it's true. 3 out of 4 Americans, in fact, many people listening right now are probably for the first time going, oh, my gosh, I guess they are, because that's always my experience when I talk about this. So 3 out of 4 Americans don't know that these are food registration cards. And then once you couple this with RFID, once you couple this with smart meters in the home, once you couple this with smart refrigerators, smart appliances, smart medicine cabinets, smart toilets even, that can monitor how quickly you consume the things you buy. We talk about in our book Spy Chips that when you throw away the packaging of the toothpaste, that they'll be able to monitor how many times you brushed your teeth based on how long it took you to go from the store to the dump with that pack of toothpaste. So it's truly amazing the level of insatiable curiosity they have about everything we do.
Dr. Albrecht, can I just step in for a second to give you a personal story? Because one of the things that bothers me about what Obama's doing and where he's taking the U.S., if they were genuinely new ideas, and they were, and nobody's more open to trying something new than the American people. But everything that he's doing has already been done and failed. I mean, I think about the green energy, the alternate energies, and the problems that Spain and all these other countries are having, where Spain had an alternate energy program, and every green job was costing them $175,000 to create. But here, I just went the other day to get my driving license renewed here in the province of British Columbia. Now, to put that in perspective, British Columbia is the only jurisdiction in North America that has a carbon tax. And it was brought to us by a professor from the local university who happens to write the computer models for the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. Okay? So they went in there. We're the only province that I know of that has already, you have to have a smart meter. So we're already ahead of the game. But I got told my driver's license needed renewing. I went in and I was told, oh, you get your driver's license, but it's also your health card. Your health card and your driver's license are now combined in this province. So that and of course it's also then your identity card, because you can use the card as a substitute for a passport crossing the border into the U.S., for example. So we're already ahead, and we're seeing this extrapolation of these cards beyond just what's going on in the supermarket.
My goodness. I was not aware that they'd already made that link. Once we get into the electronic medical records, and then we also have these electronic food purchase records, and they all get tied in with our identity, I think it's just a matter of time before we're going to have to actually show the driver's license or some form of government-issued ID document in order to purchase food. And I've been saying this for about 10 years, and a lot of people have said, oh, come on, it'll never come to that. But in Venezuela, it recently did. Under Hugo Chavez, the late Hugo Chavez, Venezuela had implemented some terrible policies involving price controls on staples. So everything from toilet paper to milk to butter to cooking oil, all the basic staples were price controlled. And of course, as anybody who's even studied basic introductory economics can tell you, when you put price controls on things, you always wind up with shortages. And so Venezuela has had some very embarrassing shortages recently, most notably of toilet paper, where they went about 6 weeks where nobody in the country could obtain any toilet paper at any price, and now the government has gone in with soldiers and actually taken over the toilet paper factories. Talk about a hilarious, it would be hilarious if it weren't so awful. So Venezuela's in a big mess. One of the things, of course, that happens when you have price controls also is that people will purchase the things at a low price under the price controls and then turn around and sell them at a high price to anyone who is being hit by the shortage. So if you can buy toilet paper for 5 cents a roll, then you buy a whole truckload of it, and now nobody else has any, and now you turn around and sell it to them for $5 a roll. So what was happening in Venezuela is they, like every other country on the globe, has introduced these marketing gimmicks called frequent shopper card programs, which I actually don't believe are marketing gimmicks. I've come to a place where I have a different view on this. These programs have now been installed in virtually every cash register at every major corporate retail establishment on planet Earth. And when I say that, when you think about the frequent shopper card scanner at the cash register, what it really is it's a system whereby a person presents an identity document, you scan their unique ID number to identify them, and then you make a decision on the basis of that as to what you will charge them for which food items. And so in Venezuela, and by the way, when I say these are everywhere, they're in Jamaica, they're in Korea, South Korea, right. They're in Yemen, they're in Mexico, they're in Canada, they're in every country where I've ever traveled. These cards are now in place. And the card is not the big deal. The infrastructure, the hundreds of millions of dollars that have been invested in the infrastructure to enable virtually every cash register on planet Earth to require an identity document in order to process a transaction, that has been, I believe, one of the most revolutionary changes in retail that has ever happened in the history of retail. And nobody understands the potential power of this. Once they pull the noose, they've got the ropes around our necks now with this purchase system. Once they pull the noose, and whether it's because of carbon credits or because of health issues, whatever reason they come up with, they will have already built all of the components necessary, including the public compliance and the public being accustomed to presenting an ID document to buy food in order to pull that noose. So in Venezuela, when they were running into these shortages, they instituted a policy that really shook me, because it's something I've been predicting for a long time, that you were only able to purchase X amount, and they designated this for each family, so, 2 gallons of milk every week, or 1 pound of butter a month. Wow. And they used the frequent shopper card infrastructure coupled with Venezuelan government-issued identity documents to enforce this program. And it wasn't just because they've taken over all the supermarkets. And so even though there's several brands of supermarkets, the Venezuelan government controls them. And so even if you were to go to one market and then drive 20 minutes to another market, because the computer databases are linked up, you would try to buy an additional half gallon of milk, and it would say, no, I'm sorry, Mrs. Gutierrez, you've already used up your quota. So there was a living demonstration of the ease with which a government can simply say, yea, verily, as of right now, everybody whose last name looks Hispanic isn't going to be allowed to buy any milk. And, if you think that's funny, in World War II, we talk about this in Spy Chips. We've got a chapter that talks about, what if Hitler had RFID? And back in Nazi Germany, few people realized this, but before they began rounding up the Jews and putting them in concentration camps, they actually began rationing what Jews were and were not allowed to buy at the grocery store. And they put restrictions on them. They were not allowed to buy white bread. They were not allowed to buy beer or wine. They were not allowed to buy butter. They were not allowed to buy. There were certain items that only Aryan Germans were allowed to purchase. They also were not allowed to travel on certain streets. They weren't allowed to enter certain government buildings. But one of the restrictions really was on the food that they were able to purchase. And if you had that yellow Jewish star, then forget it, you weren't getting any bread and butter. So these are the kinds of things that are now possible, and the infrastructure to do it is in place. The only thing missing is really the political movement to make it so. And I see all the pieces coming together to make that happen.
Katherine, I was kind of springboard from that into, you're talking about, of course, the supermarket cards, but kind of springboard into, Real ID and Pass ID, how kind of things get repackaged and revisited, and kind of, all these biometric and nanotech technologies, these identifiers, ID cards, and sort of the transition and how we're going to be, sort of taking it and liking it when it comes to the next step, which is obviously a no-brainer that everybody's going to be soon, chipped with these things, because after all, Gucci and, all these, you're wearing them in your shoes, your clothes, the Walmart shelves are stocked with them. I mean, it's everywhere now. Wouldn't it just be, geez, that's such a simple solution to just now shove it in your hand or your forehead? Get into, sort of springboard us and take our listeners through, how this sort of gradually happens.
Yeah, well, all of this ties together, and whether you're looking at grocery stores or you're looking at Google searches on the Internet or you're looking at driver's licenses or Real ID or microchip implants, I really view all of these different issues that various activists are working on, even though they seem like they're disconnected, they're really spokes to a wheel, and if you follow them all, they all lead to the same endpoint. And that endpoint is the complete and total domination of the public by a handful of people at the top. And I do a daily radio program from 4 to 6 p.m. every day, and one of the terms or one of the phrases that I've coined on my show is pond scum, which is a phrase for the people who think they're the cream who have risen to the top of the milk, but they're really the scum that have risen to the top of the pond, that green slimy layer that shuts out the oxygen for all the rest of us. And that pond scum layer of humanity, the people who really want power over others and work very hard to obtain it, are, for the first time in human history, actually getting the tools to make that domination complete. That's never been possible in the past. One of my favorite writers is actually Niccolo Machiavelli, who wrote The Prince. And people often rag on him and say, "Oh, he's terrible. He was such a rotten guy." He was actually a very brilliant political observer. And very clearly, he states in my favorite book of his is The Discourses, that if you read the Discourses, it reads like a roadmap for what's going on today. That throughout all of history, leaders have wanted to maintain control over their populations, and throughout all of history, populations have wanted to maintain their autonomy and their independence and their dignity and their freedom against tyrants who would rule over them. And so this is an eternal back and forth struggle, and that's why we have revolutions. That's why we have all the history that you can look back on. But what's happening going forward is really, for the first time, the tools of tyranny are about to become so complete that no revolution will be possible. And,
Dr. Albrecht, just for a second, I'm so glad to hear you say that about Machiavelli. I have also long been a fan, I've read the Discourses and The Prince, and I tried to figure out why the word Machiavelli has become a noun for evil in today's society. And I finally realized that he went up against the other, the power of government and control of people's lives, which was the Catholic Church. And he did it this way. The Catholic Church, he says, okay, you're born with mortal sin, and then we take control of you by baptism. And then you're a good person. Well, Machiavelli pointed out that if you have that assumption that people are basically good, you can then create a system that protects the guilty. And that's exactly what we've got with our legal system. And so, of course, the church had to make Machiavelli out to be a lunatic. And we talked earlier with the other guests about how you get marginalized. Oh, you're a birther, or you're a climate change denier, and so on. So Machiavelli had to be silenced by the church, and it's paralleling that. That's what's going on today. But I agree with you about having the tools now to effectively control to the nth degree. And how do you break that? Whether a gun's going to be able to do it or not is now a whole different question.
Well, it is, and once we start talking about RFID, it's possible to do all kinds of things with RFID that would prevent even an armed uprising. One of the proposals that we talked about in our book, Spy Chips, was the proposal to outfit guns with remotely readable radio controller devices so that they could be remotely disabled. One of the more disturbing things that we ran across was a patent for a Kevlar armband. This is something, Kevlar, of course, is the bulletproof fabric stuff, so you can't cut it, you can't burn it, you can't rip it off. If you put one of these armbands on somebody, they could not remove it. And actually loading up the Kevlar armband with anesthetic that would cause people to fall unconscious to the ground, or even with something deadly, and then having the ability through basically a cell phone signal, a radio frequency or RFID signal, to remotely simply make people pass out. You could just it'd be like dialing a phone number. You'd punch a number into a computer and boom, people would fall to the ground unconscious. They talked about using this on airplanes so that every passenger getting on an airplane would be outfitted with one of these devices in the event somebody was a terrorist. The pilot could just punch in their number and make them fall over dead. Shocking. But when we start talking about this technology that we now have, and everybody's carrying it around now. This is the shocking part. Since 2003, when I first started working on RFID, to today, the big development, of course, has been the cell phone. And all of the things that I said, ooh, be careful, don't let RFID tags get in your shoes or your clothes or your wallet. Well, people have gone 50 steps beyond that by becoming addicted to these devices, these cell phones that are basically spell phones. I mean, they're addictive. People go into almost like heroin-like withdrawal if they don't have their phones with them. And so what we thought would be a revolution with guns and tanks has basically, or a coup, a takeover with guns and tanks has been accomplished with cell phones and perks. So far from them having to demand that every person on Earth somehow comply with a Kevlar armband and a tracking device, all they have to do is come out with the new iPhone 5, and you have people forming lines around the block and paying $600-800 to get one. So, I think unless we wake up and realize that these addictive toys are really the tools that they're using to enslave us, I think we're going down the wrong road.
Well, and Catherine, it's really a great point, because these sort of clandestine globalists keep also moving the goalposts. So it seems, when you look at what's acceptable, what people will put up with, what they'll tolerate. I mean, if you start thinking about that, you just talked about boarding a plane earlier. They can decide who travels, who works, who buys, who lives and dies or procreates. I mean, this is really complete, total enslavement, is it not?
Well, it's not yet, and that's the good news. And I was thinking about this the other day as I was talking, I guess yesterday, about the new NSA data center, this new, $1-2 billion facility that's having unexplained fires, and I was actually having a very enjoyable moment on my radio show saying, listen to what I'm able to say. Good. I'm glad that there are unexplained fires that are causing this multi-billion-dollar horrible surveillance thing of the government to not function. I hope there are more fires. I hope they never get it off the ground. I hope it fails. And to me, the significant part of that was not even so much what I was saying, but the fact that I'm allowed to say it. The fact that you and I, that the four of us can get together here and all of our thousands of listeners can be hearing our words. The fact that we will be able to, as soon as we finish this interview, go back to our families and our lives, that we will be able to have a good night's sleep tonight and not be worrying that some black sedan is going to pull up and disappear us. So,
I agree with that up to a point, but isn't this the problem that, and I'm thinking now about Nazi Germany. I mean, the most support that Hitler got was from the teachers' unions, particularly the history teachers. And I've researched and studied this endlessly. And yet he, in 1932 and 33, published Mein Kampf and told people exactly what he was going to do. And I can hear people listening to us now saying, oh, this is all so far-fetched. Yeah, it's all there, it's that conspiracy theory thing again. And so they play on that. They play on, we'll let them talk. Because, there's a few people listening to them, but they're a fringe element. We still control enough of the people to marginalize those. And I think that I agree with you up to a point, but I think that that's a dangerous sort of complacency to get into.
Well, and I kind of view it the other way, that
Okay.
if we start believing that all is lost, that all communications are surveilled, that there is really no point in speaking out, and we don't grasp with both hands and appreciate and elevate the freedoms that we still have, then I think that's playing into their hands, because the globalists, the pawn scum, whatever you want to call them, they would like nothing more than for us to feel outnumbered, outmanned, outgunned, and defeated, and just tuck our tail between our legs and maybe go off and live off the grid alone. What they don't want is for us to organize, to speak out, and to fully claim those freedoms.
No, I agree, and that's why the founding fathers made the free speech number one, and the guns to protect that number two. But the point I'm making is it's the surreptitious nature of the takeover. I mean, when you go and look at the things that Hitler did, deliberately setting fire to the Reichstag and blaming the communists for it when they'd obviously done it, and when I watch it, some of the things the Obama administration do, where they're clearly, like with the shutdowns right now, they've clearly had a strategy that we'll shut this down, we'll annoy these people and those people there, and so it's the stealth of it that is the danger, and they're never going to shut me up, as Sheila knows. I mean, I just will speak to my dying day, and I hope that's not at their hands. I have massive lawsuits that I'm dealing with right now because we talked about this province having, the carbon tax. We're one of the few jurisdictions left in North America where you can still file SLAP lawsuits, that is, strategic lawsuits against public participation, and so. But I do think that. We don't stop the fighting. We don't give up. That's what they want. But I think that we have to face the realities of how people are listening, what they're using. They're letting us speak with the knowledge that most people are just marginalizing us anyway. And so somehow we've got to keep working on that. That's the challenge to me.
Yeah, no, I'm with you there. I am. I do believe that we've got to do more than just talk. Obviously. And this is one of the reasons, and like I said, we're all sort of spokes on the wheel, and we're all working in different areas. I just had Stuart Rhodes of Oath Keepers on my radio program this afternoon, and I think so highly of him and what he's doing with members of the military, firefighters, and police. Yeah. On my end, I've really taken on as my bailiwick the whole privacy issue, and after warning people and alerting people and trying to get people to not use supermarket frequent shopper cards, you can go to nocards.org or nocards.com and see the website I founded way back in 1999. And then trying to warn people about RFID, which actually was a very successful battle. We won pretty much everything we tried to do with RFID, but then realizing that just scaring people was not enough, and people need to be scared. Clearly, that's kind of step number one, like a 12-step program. If you don't know you have a problem, you can't fix it. So exactly. I spent a lot of time scaring people. Sheila, as you mentioned in the introduction, I've done over 3,000 radio and television interviews. Yeah. So, but then I hit a point where I really started to want solutions, and I'll never forget when one woman called up to a radio program where I was a guest, and she said, Katherine, you really need a hotline. And I said, really, a hotline for what? She said, well, like a suicide hotline, because after people hear what you have to say, it's so discouraging and depressing that you may want to get some volunteers to support people. And I went, oh, my gosh, is that what I'm doing? I'm here scaring people so badly by just telling them the truth. And sometimes it's hard to have the scales peeled forcibly from your eyes. People, I think it's one of the reasons why it's so easy for the mainstream media to tell the lies they tell, is even though people kind of half suspect that they're lies, they're easier to believe than the truth, because it's easier to not fully recognize what direction things are going. Once you recognize it, it's scary. And then you either have to do something or shiver in fear, And so that's why I, in 2009, said, I've had enough of this. I need to start really working on solutions. And that's where Start Page and Start Mail came about, was really trying to find what can I offer to people instead of just doom and gloom, so that there really are tangible ways that people can take back their privacy. And, it's just like Stuart Rhodes, join Oath Keepers. His advice on my radio program today, form a neighborhood watch, get to know your community, get 2 police and 2 people with a medical background and 2 engineers. And if it ever hits the fan through whatever means, earthquake, hurricane, insurrection, civil war, whatever, you've got people in your community who can band together. So these are practical things, and I think that's really what our movement has been missing for the last couple of years, is really how, what do we do? So now we all know something's wrong. What do we do, and how do we fix it?
In your research, Catherine, it's interesting. There's kind of 2 questions that jump to me, and it's interesting you mentioned what you just did with Oath Keepers, because Doug Haggman just had Yoda on his show in the last couple of weeks talking about, such amazing things. We'll post that link, but really, how you can avoid all the things that are going on right now in terms of surveillance and, how people are getting robbed and mugged, et cetera. But you're right. Action is required. And, as you're pouring, you poured through, I don't know how many 30,000 confidential government classified technical documents in your research. And as you're researching, think about it for a second. And by the way, your book's incredible. It really is I think it is what some of the media said. It really is a beautiful masterpiece of work, and kudos for your compilation of information. And as you're pouring through all this research, you must have been horrified at some of the things you were seeing. And, really, I know there's probably a lot of things, but what really shocked you the most in your discoveries? Because as we discover things on a day-to-day basis, especially, think about transhumanism being on the rise, when you get into this stuff, it's like this sci-fi horror come to life. How did you sort of internalize that? How did you process that? And what, again, really shocked you the most in all your research?
Well, I think these things come to you and they unfold in pieces. And the first shocking part was the realization that these companies actually, with a straight face, wanted to watch what we did with the products that we bought when we had them in our own homes. And that was rather shocking. The first RFID meeting I went to back in 2002 or 2003, I actually sat next to somebody who was part of the pharmaceutical retail industry, and he said with a straight face, won't it be great when we know every time the consumer takes the lid off the toothpaste in their own bathroom? And I had a fork halfway to my mouth, and I don't think I set my fork down, and I don't think I took another bite at that lunch because I was just so horrified to think that these people had such audacious gall to think that they had any right whatsoever to invite themselves into our bathrooms. And, of course, it is possible to know every time someone takes the lid off the toothpaste if you have a smart meter on their home, or if you have a smart medicine cabinet or a smart fridge that can pick up the RFID signals. You just put a little tag in the lid, and you put a little antenna, and you put a little lead that connects and disconnects, and voila. So some of that, I think the part that was the most shocking for me at first was how entitled these folks felt to getting all of our information, how it didn't, the privacy implications of that, the moral implications of that were not anywhere on their radar screen. It was all, how can we maximize the amount of information we can gather about other people? And really viewing other people almost as subhuman. There really was a nasty sort of, we are above our subjects. And marketers do this all the time. I've got an undergraduate degree in marketing. And, they'll often talk about, the targets or the marks or one of the
kind of a dehumanization, isn't it?
Very much so, and talking about people who don't have as much money as you do as bottom feeders, and these are actual phrases that get tossed around and used as they refer to the people they're trying to, and they talk about how stupid people are and how stupidly people will sign up for things or fall into their traps. And we see this all the time on the internet. Half the apps that are out there, in fact, more than half the apps that are out there, are not even the app they purport to be. That's just a lure so that they can spy on you and get you to
read the
check,
fine
I
print.
agree. It's true. It's horrible.
Catherine, you just
Albrecht,
actually just let me jump in, Tim. You just reminded me of something you were just talking about when you said, you get these smart TVs. Tell our listeners about in England the fact that they're watching to make sure what time your kids go. Tell our listeners about that.
Oh my gosh, it's horrible. In England, there actually are cameras that have been placed in people's homes that actually surveil inside the home. If you've run into trouble with the authorities with your kids, there are actually families in England that have been forced by the government to put cameras in their homes that actually watch and listen to their dinner conversations and watch their interactions. I mean, it's straight out of 1984. It's exactly what George Orwell predicted. Once we get to the smart meter, and this is a really important topic, because what the smart meter does is it makes your house a node in this global network of awareness that's being built. And so if they can find a way to make your house report in periodically, and that's really what your cell phone does. Your cell phone reports in every 15 minutes, here I am, okay, now she's going this way, going north, going left. The toll transponder on your car turns your car into a node if you're dumb enough to get one of those things, and if you have one, please get rid of it and just pay cash. But they're looking for ways to get us to voluntarily place tracking surveillance devices onto various things in our lives so that we become nodes in the network. And the network that is being built, it is referred to by, I think Cisco calls it the Internet of Everything. IBM calls it the Internet of Things. And now Cisco wants to call it the Internet of Everything, but it's the idea. In fact, Cisco was wringing its hands in a recent document I read that fewer than 1% of physical objects on Earth are yet wired into the global brain yet.
Speaking of sinister companies, Catherine, your IBMs, your Ciscos, your Dells, your HPs, tell them how they worked with the Chinese government, and of course what Mexico and India will follow, but how they're mandatorily tracking their citizens. This is right out of a sci-fi horror.
Well, this is American companies who did this, and you just named them, the Dells, the Ciscos, the IBMs. These are Hewlett-Packard, too. These are companies that sold technology to the Chinese to issue RFID-tagged, spy-chipped identity documents. And the city of Shenzhen, China, is one of their up-and-coming sort of future technology cities. In Shenzhen, China, they have outfitted the streets, the light posts, the sidewalks. The entire city has been outfitted with cameras and also with RFID readers. And so if you are carrying one of these, every citizen in China is carrying an identity document with an RFID tag that contains incredibly detailed information. It's got their health history, their reproductive history linked up with it. It's got their employment history, even their landlord's name and phone number, all of it linked into a microchip that can be remotely read from across the street by Chinese authorities. Even if you've got your driver's license in your pocket, in your wallet, in your backpack, stowed away, they can stand on the other side of the street, aim a reader device at you, and determine all of this information about you. And they've embedded the readers to do this into doorways, into the actual infrastructure of the entire city. So that would be bad enough, and of course it's communist China, and of course we're not surprised because they're the people who shot people with hollow point bullets at Tiananmen Square, so they're China, until you realize it's American companies who did this. And as soon as the American companies outfitted all of China with these identity documents, I've read their internal and their marketing documents. Their next question was, where next? What's our next big market? And so they went to India. And India, which has, second only to China in terms of huge population, India also now issuing national ID cards biometric national ID cards with all 10 fingerprints to every single Indian citizen with a microchip in it. If you stack these things on top of each other, they would reach to the moon. So India now putting out one of the most invasive national ID programs on the globe. And again, all of this is being driven by U.S. companies. And so when we look here at the U.S. and we say, those are those countries, India, China, of course they would be doing that. You got to realize the people lobbying for that are lobbying right here at home because they have deep connections here because they're American companies.
Well, the most deadly regimes in history are, look at Stalin. He killed over 60 million of his own people. You look at when government's given that much power, I mean, in China, that's a good example. India next, this deadly force that's all around us now. I mean, this is amazing. You've got these sinister American companies doing this, mandating, to track their citizens. Now look at Obamacare. You've got this digital. Weigh in a little bit about that, Catherine, because I think there is some confusion. I mean, and then we'll springboard into VeriChip and what they did with the Alzheimer's and what your role in that was. But, I mean, weigh in on this complete horrifying digital medical record that is right in Obamacare.
Yeah, so this is the perfect segue into implantable microchips, because when you've got an identity document, and let's just use the Chinese one for example, that has all of this information in one card, and then as we were just talking about, having these things rolling out in Canada, where your ID card is also your medical card, where it's also your fill in the blank, the thing that turns on your car, opens up your office. You will eventually hit a point where those things become extraordinarily valuable. And if you think identity theft is bad today, wait until every single aspect of your life is on one card that you could lose, you could drop it. And so at that point, I think, is where we're going to start seeing it's got to be a bracelet. Well, it's got to be a wristband. It's got to be in your watch. It's got to be an implant, right? That's your next step, because you can't lose the implant. And so when the place where we're seeing this come in, the biggest argument in favor of implants has always been health, which is ludicrous, because we were able to actually topple the RFID VeriChip implant company because of health reasons, because they actually cause cancer. So when you implant one of these things, whether you put it into a person or an animal, it causes an inflammatory reaction that in a number of cases has actually led to the development of fast-growing malignant tumors around them. In fact, it's between 1 and 10% of laboratory animals injected with RFID microchips for identification purposes actually develop tumors around the chip and die. And so I wrote a 45-page paper on this and worked very closely with the Associated Press for 6 months to do the behind-the-scenes research. And Todd Lewin, who is kind of my Glenn Greenwald, he got all this information together, and when this story came out, we watched the VeriChip Corporation, which was selling these implantable microchips for health purposes for Alzheimer's patients and seniors and diabetics and others. We watched them go from having Blue Cross Blue Shield running a trial in diabetics, and they were going to chip 200 Alzheimer's patients down in Florida, and their stock was trading at over $11 a share. We came out with this horrifying information and truly shocked the industry and brought them down to literally 25 cents a share. They were delisted from the stock exchange. They lost everything. And all of those patients who had been implanted quietly had all their microchips removed. That happened in 2007, and we have actually not seen any call for human microchipping since 2007, since that story broke. So to me, that I like telling that story, because I like encouraging people that sometimes when it seems like something is inevitable. I mean, you had Tommy Thompson, the head of Health and Human Services, promoting the VeriChip for implants. You had John Halamka, the head of IT for Harvard University, promoting human implants for medical purposes.
And didn't he get one himself? Right on TV?
None of them did. In fact, we're the ones who reported that Tommy Thompson never did get his own chip implant. He kept saying he was going to do it, but he never did.
Well, Catherine, it's a good segue. I really want to play this really quickly for the listeners, because it's interesting you mentioned two things, and I thought this clip was so fascinating to hammer really home this point. And you talk about Alzheimer's patients, and you talk about the horror of what they could do with this kind of technology. I want every listener to pay attention to how the spin doctoring media starts out. It's about a 3-minute clip. It starts out very sinister, but pay attention how they kind of make it almost sound really good at the end. I'm surprised Katie Couric and ABC aren't on there, but just take a listen to this. I want you to pay attention to the language that's used, middle and the end, when it starts off sinister.
All right, this next story may sound like something out of, a Hollywood thriller. A Saudi inventor has created a killer microchip. It's designed to track terrorists and criminals and, well, you can think of somebody. Not only does it include a GPS device, it also has a lethal dose of cyanide, which can be activated at any time. You get my point? The inventor's bid for a patent has been rejected in Germany. Joining us now this morning to talk about it, Jake Ward, deputy editor of Popular Science. Okay, this is pretty macabre, pretty sinister and nefarious. How exactly would this work?
Well, there's a category of technology that involves GPS tracking systems being shrunk down to the size where you could actually implant it surgically. And we've seen a number of applications for this. This is without question the most sinister version of it that I've certainly heard of. And the notion of tracking criminals is not new, but the notion of killing them remotely, I think, is a whole new thing. Yeah,
and Germany says, look, we're not going to approve this for that very purpose. And apparently, in some of the paperwork in applying for the patent, you could track fugitives from justice, terrorists, illegal immigrants, criminals, political opponents, defectors, and Saudi Arabians who don't return home from pilgrimage. It's a little bit wild.
I agree. I mean, the thing about this kind of patent is Germany has very tight laws about making sure that you're not registering something that really is just a bad idea, a scary idea. And in this case, this guy obviously has some very strong feelings about what it would be used for, but it just seems a little outlandish.
Yeah. Well, terrorist groups might be interested. I'm sure they'd be happy to grant their own form of a patent for that.
Sure.
The bigger world, though, of GPS, talk to us about how it's being used to, for example, track sex offenders?
Sure. The Washington State Legislature right now is considering the possibility of registering perhaps 100 sex offenders with a GPS chip that's implanted in their shoulder because they've found that a few of them have been wearing them on their wrists and then have cut them off, which just defeats the purpose. And so, but the larger world of this technology is actually pretty happy stuff. I mean, there is new technology for tracking Alzheimer's patients, who
may wander away.
Right.
Sure.
Tracking the vital signs of professional athletes from the sideline. There's been a couple of cases in which football players have collapsed of heat exhaustion, and seeing the early warning signs of that. There's technology that sort of allows you to do that remotely. Even something as benign as keeping track of your dog. A radio frequency tag implanted in your pet. The vet finds a stray, scans it, and finds its rightful owner in an instant.
Yeah. Do you see an explosion of the use of GPS devices? And obviously, a lot of people are concerned about an intrusion of privacy.
Absolutely, sure. I mean, I think that there is a trade-off there, and obviously, the inventor who filed for this patent has gone across the line in terms of privacy. Yeah. But the use of GPS in the future will allow you to, you'll never lose your wallet again. You'll never lose your keys again. Right. It's that kind of stuff where you're going to, you'll be able to beep any object you own, and find it in the house. And so, there's the vicious expression, and then there's the really, really helpful expression that I think we'll see in the future.
I lose socks in the dryer. I don't know how that happens. Maybe that would help me in that regard. Jake Ward, deputy editor of Popular Science. Interesting stuff. Thanks very much.
I got my...
this is what I find so fascinating about, hey, you never lose your wallet. It's a little bit of a trade-off, but hey, we need to monitor those vital signs of the athletes, etc. We don't want to have medical patients wandering off. Weigh in on that, Catherine, how they spun that.
Yeah, it's always about safety or efficiency. These seem to be the two things that have been so powerful. The fear of terrorism, the fear of abduction, the fear of medical... Sex offenders, and also just the fear of death, the fear of illness. The first target for these implants, and really the only one that they've ever gotten any real traction on, has been diabetics and Alzheimer's patients, because there's a physical disability there, and there's a concern on the part of diabetics that, well, if I were ever unconscious and in a hospital, I would certainly want somebody to know that I was diabetic. Of course, there's a much less invasive way of doing that through the medical alert bracelet, and I think there's not a diabetic out there who would trust a chip implant that couldn't be seen to even be scanned or found or the database to link up or any of that to actually function. I think a medical alert bracelet was a lot safer. Something else to bear in mind about the medical aspect of this is in the event of an actual emergency, a hurricane, an earthquake, something where the infrastructure itself was not functioning, these microchip implants wouldn't even serve their stated purpose, because the way they're supposed to work is that you scan the microchip with a handheld device. It picks up the signal, and then you have to then take the number that you've scanned from the device, and you have to go onto the Internet into a database and pull up the record associated with the number. So the chip itself only contains a 16-digit numerical code. That's it. There is no information in there saying this person's name or they're a diabetic or anything else. In order to get that information, you've got to cross-reference a database. And as anyone who's ever seen the Internet go down, even for minor reasons, you can only imagine what would happen if you really had an emergency situation where people needed medical information. You wouldn't want to rely on those microchips to get it.
Katherine,
the people's right. Quick thing as you were speaking, Dr. Albrecht. Their right to track the product ends where your purchase begins. I mean, talk a little bit about that, because I mean now it's so it's so trendy and popular, and Madison Avenue's pushing this. Your Gucci bag has it, your shoes, your hat, your jeans, everything you wear. I mean, first of all, people did email in questions during the day, and one of the common thing was, how do you know if one of your things has a little RFID chip in them? And the second thing is, I loved your statement, and I think you've said this interview before, their right to track that product ends where I buy my purchase, and they have to tell the people. So talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so the thing about RFID, and if you read the book Spy Chips, you can see the kinds of plans that they had, is that RFID can be hidden into objects. It can be pressed into the mold when you pour the plastic to create a plastic object. You can actually embed the RFID tag inside of it. You can sandwich it between the layers of shoes. You can sew it into the seams of clothing. It's really easy to hide an RFID tag on something somebody's wearing or carrying. And, of course, that raises the issue of tracking. A lot of the plans that we found and talked about in Spy Chips were plans to put RFID readers in the floors so that as unsuspecting people with RFID tags in their shoes stepped on your floor mat would be secretly reading the tag from their shoes and then identifying them through that information. And they actually envision a whole database, the Internet of Things is what they call it, where instead of just having a collection of websites with DNS addresses and URLs, that you would actually have each physical object on the planet would have an entry, its own entry in a database stating where it had been and who it belonged to. And so in a scene like that, I walk through a doorway and you read number 308247 off my shoe, and then you cross-reference it with the fact that I bought that at the Foot Locker 3 weeks ago, and my name's Katherine Albrecht, and there's a pretty good chance I'm the person standing in those shoes. So really that the whole big picture of using physical objects to surveil people is what they were really looking for. As far as the consumer is concerned, it's really hard to know where these things are. And I spent a couple of fruitless years of my life trying to get legislation passed. We have a couple of bills. We had two bills, the RFID Right to Know Act, that would have called for labeling on RFID tagged objects. And as we've seen from the GMO labeling effort, the big lobbyists come in with their big bucks and make these sob stories about how difficult it will be for them to label things, and so then those bills didn't get passed. But right now, it is not a crime anywhere in the 50 states of the U.S. to hide an RFID tracking device in a consumer item, to sell you that item, and then to use hidden reader devices to use that consumer item to track you, identify you, surveil you, and make records of your activities. We saw some horrible plans, like IBM. I think probably the most horrifying thing in the book to me, because IBM is such a big company, is IBM had patented something that they call the Person Tracking Unit. And just the name alone should give you chills. The Person Tracking Unit was a plan, and is a plan, it's patented, they received a U.S. patent for this, to place RFID devices, the reader devices, for the RFID tags that IBM expects will be appearing in all of our belongings. And they would place these in museums, theaters, libraries, bus stations, even elevators and public restrooms, so that every place you go, you will be queried from head to toe by a reader in the doorway, in the bathroom sink, in the furniture, that will identify everything you're wearing and carrying, do a complete inventory of all your belongings, and also, of course, be able to identify you, because each of those belongings carries an identity record of who purchased it. And IBM had, with a completely straight face, filed this patent and said how useful it will be, because as people purchase these items and pay for them with credit cards or frequent shopper cards or otherwise identify themselves, that those records will be cross-linked, and they'll be able to track essentially everything and everyone everywhere all the time. So even if you leave your cell phone at home, even if you know better than to take your cell phone because you don't want to be tracked, your shoe could be tracking you and you would never know it.
Well, they're systematically really ushering in a cashless society, and then, of course, on top of that, you've got, how many people do you know, maybe with the exception of you and I, Catherine, and Tim Ball and maybe Haggman, that walk around with cash anymore? You never see anybody carrying cash, and now you've got the latest iPhone software. At the click of a button, you can scan, anything. It's now cool to scan your hand, scan your Visa with your little chip in it. Nobody carries cash anymore. If I can't afford it, I don't buy it. I think that's the same with you, and I really would like to commend you on that, by the way. But do you find it funny that, this mark of the beast idea, the Bible, it's pretty much unfolding around us. They're mock speeding in this whole cashless system. There were people back in the 70s. My parents had a book called When Your Money Fails, and it was funny. They were talking about UPS. I was 12 years old in 1982 when they were talking about this, and yet now you see we've sprungboard from, telephones to these UPS or UPC things, and then we springboard into cashless society. And, you've got let's face it, we can't already buy or sell anything already, and half the continent's unemployed. The average price of food and gas is soaring beyond the reach of the average Joe lunchbox carrier. Make some connections with all this, Catherine.
Yeah, well, I make no mystery of the fact that I am a Bible-believing Christian, and I actually came to this realization. I was 9 years old when my grandmother took me aside and told me that there was going to come a time when people would not be able to buy and sell without a number. And this was in the 1970s when there were no satellites, at least not to my knowledge. There was no internet. Even the cash registers were just calculators with drawers. They weren't hooked up to anything. I could not imagine at that time. I didn't even know anybody with a credit card then. My parents, if they were going to pay for something, paid in cash or wrote a check. And I could not imagine my little 8-year-old brain trying to figure out how in the world would you buy and sell with a number. I couldn't wrap my head around it. And my grandmother made me promise that I would never take the mark of the beast, which, of course, is in Revelation, the last book of the Bible. It's in chapter 13 of Revelation, which is easy to remember because it's kind of an unlucky number. And it's the last 3 verses in chapter 13, verses 16 through 18, that talks about a time when all people, great and small, rich and poor, free and bond or imprisoned or enslaved, will be caused to have a mark on their right hand or their forehead, and without that number they will not be able to buy or sell. And that number, of course, is 666.
666.
The number of man or a man. It's you can't really tell which because of the way the Greek language it's written in. It's either the number of man or the number of a man. But that 666, the mark of the beast, is punished in 2 ways. Number one, with a noisome and grievous sore for all people who take it, so there's a physical punishment, and then a far more horrifying permanent spiritual punishment, which is that the people who take the mark of the beast, the smoke of their torment will rise forever, and they will have no rest day or night who take the mark of the beast or worship his image or worship the beast. So my grandmother made me promise not to take it, and that was an easy promise because I couldn't even imagine how I would take it. I made a promise to myself, though, as I tried to figure this out in my own head. I said, if I ever start to see this come to pass, I'm going to pull my Bible out and I'm going to know that every word in it is true, because this is so crazy unlikely. I cannot imagine how you could require a number to buy and sell. I cannot imagine how you could possibly put such a number in someone's right hand or their forehead. And if it does, I'll tell my kids and grandkids, and someday, thousands of years in the future, my descendants will also know not to take the mark. Little did I know that in my own lifetime it would become so obvious how you buy and sell with a number that an 8-year-old could tell you that today without batting an eye. Which kind of number? You mean a credit card, a Visa card, PayPal, there's a million ways to pay with numbers now. And the right hand is coming into play too, because you've got Disneyland now actually issuing RFID wristbands onto the right hands of kids, 8-year-old kids, as they go into Disney with their number right in there. You've got what's the big music festival? They're all doing it now, issuing these RFID tags on people's right hands to get into the music festivals. Coachella is the first one to do that.
Track them around the parks,
Yeah, exactly. So you've got the right hand, you've got the wrist, you've got the numbered, you've got the number buy and sell, you've got the cashlessness coming, you've got all of the pieces that, 30 years ago, 35 years ago, when I was a kid, I could not even begin to picture how it would come together. And yet it's coming together so... It's like clockwork. It's like click, 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 each little piece just moving right down the track, boom, boom, boom. And I've had a lot of people say to me, well, the people writing When Your Money Fails, I think that was Mary Stuart Ralphie who wrote that book.
You're right.
Yeah, in the 70s.
Wow, that's impressive.
Yeah.
I thought I was the only one who knew that book.
Yeah,
my Uncle Harry and Auntie Lorraine gave it to me, and I was looking at this at, 10 years old, kind of similar to you, going, what is the mark of the beast? Didn't sound too good.
How would that be possible? How could that happen? And so, a lot of people say, "Oh, Catherine, are you calling RFID the mark of the beast? You're barking up the wrong tree." People used to say it was the barcode. Ha ha, it isn't.
Yeah.
And then in the 30s, people used to say it was a social security number, and it wasn't. And what I say to that is every single one of those things was a step towards the mark. And if I'd been around in the 30s, I would have objected to that. If I'd been around in the 70s, I would have objected to the barcode, because all of it is just one step closer. And the best analogy I've been able to draw for this is if you're in California and you're on a train and the destination you do not want to get to is New York, and every stop along the way is on a straight line between you and New York and bringing you 100 miles closer, then eventually you're going to need to get off the train because you can tell where it's going. And so everything from the Social Security number to the smartphones to the smart meters to the RFID to the barcodes to the purchase registration in all of the retail establishments. You want to talk about instituting the mark of the beast. If you want to control where people buy and sell, where is that? That's cash registers. It's already there. It's already there. This is the thing that's happened over the last 10 years that nobody has even noticed. We've already installed the infrastructure. So every step of this gets you closer and closer, and eventually you just have to say, this train is going to the mark of the beast, and every stop that gets me closer to it, I'm going to just call a piece of that, and I'm getting off the train.
Kathleen, one of the issues I want to raise, because one of the places people are most vulnerable is their children. There was an oblique reference to abduction, but I can see parents volunteering to have a chip put into their child, because if their child gets abducted or goes missing even, they can call somebody and have the child located and so on. But you could, if that was going to occur, the parent wouldn't have any idea what was in that chip that was put into their child, and therefore they could put all sorts of information. And I can see that one of the next steps you mentioned right now, that they read the chip and they get the number, and then they've got to go and put that into the internet. But the next step that's very logical is going directly from the chip to a satellite to a government computer, and not stopping in between. So I wonder if you'd like to comment about those ideas.
Yeah, one of our big battles in the last year and a half was the San Antonio School District, which Andrea Hernandez was the student there who filed a First Amendment religious objection against her school's use of active RFID tracking badges that they were requiring these kids to wear on lanyards around their necks. And Andrea, we actually went out on the first day of school and protested, and I worked closely with Andrea all this last year, and fortunately we got the school to put an end to the program. But the real thing that I learned in going out to San Antonio, flying out there a couple of times and interviewing people and really familiarizing myself with that program, is that it makes the children more trackable and more vulnerable to predators and abduction than if they did not have the tag. And that is because, and I interviewed a bunch of people. I interviewed Cindy Southworth from the National Network to End Domestic Violence,
right?
Who said the last thing in the world you want to put on someone who's being stalked is an RFID device.
Yeah.
Because the first person who's going to pick up the signal and use it to track their victim is the stalker. So putting a tracking device on a kid it's the stupidest thing in the entire world that you could ever possibly do. If you want to keep a kid safe, you keep the kid under your watchful eye, and you keep the kid low key and unobtrusive and untrackable rather than making them trackable, because the bad guys are the first people to capitalize on this technology. And in fact, I interviewed a convicted sex offender who had served 16 years in prison for his crimes against children. It was quite a horrifying thing to interview this man, but he's out on parole. He's turned over a new leaf, and it was actually his parole officer and counselor who recommended I speak to him. And he, on camera with, his image blurred and his voice distorted, he proceeded to tell me that, yes, absolutely, he would have been using this technology to track his victims, that he could have sat in the comfort of his own home and known when his victim arrived home next door, because this thing has a 300-foot read range, the length of a football field, that he would not even have to peek through the curtain or look out the window to know when she was home or when she wasn't home, that he would be able to sit in a car and know if she took a shortcut through an alley. He would be able to drive down the street and figure out if she was at a friend's house. I mean, this was horrifying information. And, to hear someone who actually has committed these crimes so glibly be able to describe how he would use this technology to stalk children was just chilling.
Yeah,
Dr. Katherine, what do you say to people that, and this is the most furious statement, and I want to thank you for your work, too, and I'm toward the end of the program here going to give out your information, your websites, how people can support you. And listeners, look at the work this woman's done in the last 10 years. The very least people can do is support you, Katherine. And God bless you and your grandmother for having that conversation with you as a young child to, kind of give you a heads up, because it really sounds like it was really the precursor, the catalyst that threw you into this work, and you've certainly influenced me going into radio. And your books again are just the stuff you've done. You've spoke with the Federal Trade Commission, the Federal Reserve Bank. Like I said, your resume is impressive. You're an amazing, beautiful, powerful woman of God. You've been out there protesting in the streets. You have been a voice. You've been a kind of a beacon of hope for people that don't have a voice. But when you hear this statement after all you've done, and how passionate I know you are about our liberties and freedoms, and you hear people say, well, Katherine, you shouldn't be concerned because, hey, if you're not doing anything wrong, what about individual sovereign rights? And they're obviously mock speeding this RFID chip into, and hey, everybody's got a forehead, so that works for people that don't have the hand. When you hear people actually saying statements like that, what is your thoughts? Well, if you got nothing to hide.
Well, I think that's shifting a little bit. I've been doing this work since 1999. And I really have to hand it to Ed Snowden. And my hat is off to him. He's actually one of my personal heroes. Ed Snowden, who sacrificed everything he cared about for his friends, for us. And it's actually in my email signature. Actually, I have a quote, of course, Christ himself. And I'm not comparing Ed Snowden to Christ, but he, Christ said, greater love has no man than this, that he lay down his life for his friends. Yeah. And that's really what Ed Snowden did for all of us. He will never again see the Golden Gate Bridge or the Allegheny Mountains or the Manhattan skyline. He's given it all up for us. And that sacrifice that he made in letting us know what our government was doing has changed the playing field so dramatically that I fully anticipate this Thanksgiving when I sit down with extended family members who've always kind of politely just said, oh, that's very nice, Katherine. I fully expect all of them to do what everybody else has done over the last 6 months and say, you were right. You were right all along. Oh, my gosh, what do we do? So this is a really unique moment in history because we've got the tools to make change, and now we've got, I believe, the numbers to make the change. We've got the majority of Americans now not trusting the lies that they're being told by the mainstream media and by the federal government. We've got the majority of Americans feeling very much protective of their privacy right now in a way that has never been the case before. So I'm hearing much less, if you're not doing anything wrong, then who cares if they watch me? I'm hearing a lot more, yikes, why are they watching me? I'm not doing anything wrong.
Right.
It's a shift, and a good one.
Well, I just personally think that you've touched something, right? You nailed something very precisely, and you've said, you talk about the family kind of, let's not talk about the pink elephant in the living room, but the bottom line is that, you're a very intelligent woman. There's a lot of very intelligent, patriotic, freedom-loving people that are doing this. It isn't just people sitting in their mother's basement on a computer, being the Facebook armchair patriot. I mean, we are out there, sort of frontline center, fighting these battles. Do you ever kind of feel very alone in all this, though, Katherine?
I got to tell you, I'm really excited. I think it's exciting. I loved having Stuart Rhodes on the show today because Stuart, people know him as the head of Oath Keepers, but most people don't know that he actually attended Yale Law School and graduated summa cum laude with his undergraduate degree. I mean, these are smart people. You talk about Edwin Vieira. You talk about, I mean, the people who are fighting on our side are so extraordinarily talented and brilliant and articulate and thoughtful and philosophically grounded that this is not, I know that the mainstream, lamestream media would like to paint the people who are waking up as paranoid conspiracy theorists and half crazy. But the label isn't sticking. It's not. I mean, I've got a doctorate from Harvard University. Stuart Rhodes has a law degree from Yale University. Edwin Vieira is a Harvard graduate. We have all of their credentials and more, plus integrity on top of that. So I think it's really becoming a real challenge for the people on that team to maintain the lie that the American people are somehow better served by them than they are by the truth, and it's not working anymore. So I have in the past felt alone. I've certainly felt alone when I was doing nothing but full-time activism and could barely make ends meet and was spending grocery money to try to keep a website up. So I certainly have felt alone in that regard, especially when I was fighting in the state capitals around the country and paying my own way and going broke. And I would show up to these conference hearings, and in would walk the lobbyists with their $3,000 suits on with their Rolexes and their gold cross pens. And there were moments at that time that I thought, wow, I'm it feels a little difficult. But I don't feel so much that way at this point. I'm working with a wonderful company, startpage.com, doing work that I absolutely believe in for a company that I fully believe in. I love doing my daily radio show at kmashow.com. We have the world is really our oyster with new email coming out, startmail.com coming out, and if I could put in a plug for StartMail, we are going to be rolling out beta test accounts to 50,000 people who have signed up for private email. They will each get a free 3-month trial account, and then we'll begin issuing paid accounts next year. Those paid accounts are going to be first come, first serve, and I have a feeling that they're going to be very hard to come by. But if people would like to go to startmail.com, you can watch a video of me describing the private email service that's coming out. We're estimating between $5 to $7 a month, so it's not free, but then again, neither are these.
That's a good price.
I think so, and when you compare it to your cable bill or how much you spend on stamps to send postal mail, I think it's a good deal.
Or lamestream media in general, spoon feeding us and churning out the lies. I mean, it's all worth it too.
That's right. We pay for all of it, so it'll be if people go to startmail.com and mention that they heard Katherine Albrecht on this radio program, then they can sign up to reserve an account. It's no obligation. Nobody makes you get an account, but it puts you in the queue, so when we start issuing the accounts, the people who sign up will get first dibs at getting the best email addresses and make sure that they actually get some of those prized accounts when they're available.
Wonderful. Well, also, Katherine, plug your website and other info for our listeners and where they can get copies of your books, because you also have, in addition to a lot of books you've written, you have is it out yet, your children's book, that beautiful book?
Oh, yeah, boy. Let me tell you what is available before I get to that one. Spy Chips, of course, it was published in 2006, and I've had a lot of people say, well, that's so out of date. It's not. It's more timely today than when we wrote it, because we were a good 10 years ahead of our time. Every single thing we wrote about in Spy Chips is happening. And at that time, people said, oh, it's so futuristic, this will never happen. All of it is happening. So if people want to get a copy of Spy Chips, you can go to spychips.com. We've got a section on there of even where you can find it at a local library. You can just punch it in and figure out where you can even read it for free. So don't let finances stand between you and getting a copy of Spy Chips. And I like to say it belongs on every Liberty Lover's bookshelf, because it is the only book that really gives you the full scoop on where RFID is going. And I've had a lot of people say, well, I don't know, it sounds boring to read about technology. It's really not, because my co-author, Liz McIntyre, is a brilliantly talented, hilarious writer. We've got talking plants, we've got Elvis Presley, we've got whipped cream, we've got bars in Spain, we've got all kinds of cool stuff in there. And she really made the book extremely lively. It's a hoot. It's an easy read and a fun read, so make sure to get a copy of Spy Chips. I also was the associate producer on a movie called Shadow Government, which is a great film version to really help people who don't get it yet about privacy to see the big picture. Is that the Grant
Jeffries video, Katherine?
It is. Indeed it is.
I own it. My uncle owns it. Wally, hello, big shout-out to you, too, because he inspired me to buy that. And you did an incredible job. That's the very first time I ever was exposed to you, and I must say, wonderful overview in that Shadow Government.
Terrific. Yeah, I was blessed. They actually contacted me to be in the film, and then actually wanted me to help them find people to interview for the film. And one thing led to another, and I wound up writing a large portion of the script, and then all of the people that are interviewed in the film are my privacy colleagues, so it was a lot of fun to help produce that and fly around and interview people and make that happen.
Love Grant Jeffries' work,
the late Grant Jeffries, and I miss him very much. The thing about Shadow Government that makes it such an extraordinary film is that if you get a copy of Shadow Government and you say to someone, hey, listen, I've got a movie, and they'll go, and then you say, well, listen, just watch 5 minutes of it. And you can get virtually anyone to watch 5 minutes of something. And
I've never getting them to watch 5 minutes, because it's so compelling you can't just watch 5 minutes.
There you go. And so once you get the 5 minutes, then they're hooked for the entire film all the way to the end. And I should let people know the film it's a secular film until the last 5 minutes, and then Grant Jeffries appears and talks about the Bible.
Yeah.
And I think it's very appropriate, because by the time you get to the end of the movie, you are quaking in your boots looking for a solution. And really the only long-term solution is the lifeboat. If the Titanic's sinking, you got to find the lifeboat, and that's Jesus Christ and his saving blood. I mean, there's no other answer. So Shadow Government, and then my radio program is Monday through Friday, 4 to 6 p.m. Eastern Time. That is at my name, KatherineAlbrecht.com or KMAShow.com. There's also, can I give out the phone number? There's a 24-hour listen line. So if people want to hear it, they can call this number, 605-562-7703. And that is a number that you can listen to it live, 4 to 6 Eastern on that number. You can also listen to it in a repeating 2-hour block for 24 hours till the next program comes on. And that, again, is 605-562-7703 or kmashow.com. And finally, I want to encourage people to make the switch. If you're still using Google or Yahoo or Bing for your searches, please make the switch to startpage.com. It is the world's most private search engine. And what we do, because most people want the good Google results, but they don't want to be spied on by Google, is when you go to startpage.com, you can make it your home page. You can add it to your browser. It's very, very simple. And all the places that you would normally use Google, you can use Startpage instead. And when you use Startpage, you type in your search query just like you normally would, pecan pancakes or my local park hours, whatever. And we take your query and submit it for you to Google. So Google never sees you. They never make contact with your browser. They can't put cookies or tracking things on you. They only see us. We get the results back from them and serve them to you privately, and then we delete all records of your visit. So we don't store what you searched for, and we don't store your IP address. So at the end of the day, we do not know who is searched on our service. And the other thing that's awesome about Startpage, especially in today's climate, is because Startpage is offshore. It's based in the Netherlands. We are not subject to the Patriot Act. We are not subject to PRISM programs, FBI requests. No U.S. law enforcement requests whatsoever would be honored if we were to receive them. So totally private, startpage.com, third-party certified, and I was one of the co-creators, so you have my word on it, too, that it really
and
is
you don't
private.
have the Google CEO, Ray Kurzweil, the big transhumanist, hacking into your stuff.
My gosh! That man is out of control. He's
insane.
He is, and he's now in charge of their entire IT engineering division.
I know, how spooky is that? Well, it's funny, Catherine, because you mentioned something in an interview in the past about, the emblem of Apple being the bite out of the, Apple Computer obviously is the biggest company on the planet, and you mentioned the bite out of the apple. I mean, if that's not right back to the Garden of Eden, but it's funny because you also, you touch on things like, men becoming God. And I mean, if anybody just wants to jump on www.2045 initiative, and one's just 2045.com, I mean, you've got these global clandestines trying to become immortal. You've got, next phase avatars where you can link up your brain coming out next year because, they can do such a better job than God. I mean, this is a sinister, globally orchestrated sci-fi horror nanotechnology of a morality. I mean, don't get me started on DARPA, but all this stuff strongly correlates with the Bible prophecy, and we just, we're systematically being by stealth. This is just Luciferian, sinister stuff that's just right out of a sci-fi, isn't it?
Absolutely. And, I'll come back to what I always say is the only answer to any of this, because it is scary, it is real, it is coming. It was all prophesied and all foreseen 2,000 years ago by the Apostle John and also in the book of Daniel. And the only answer, I mean, if the world were going to hell randomly, I'd be scared. But the fact that the world is going to hell in exactly the way we were told it was going to go to hell, to me, is extremely reassuring, because if all of the creepy stuff in the Bible is true, then all the good stuff in the Bible is true, too. And so all you got to do is get out your Bible, and if you've not yet made that connection with the Savior, if you've not yet found His blood to protect you against this dark thing that's coming, that, it's not too late. Do it today. Do it right now. It's not that hard to do. Just say, hey, listen, I can't fight this by myself. I realize that I am in no position to stand before a holy God because I'm a sinner and I need help. And the rest of it, boy, it's right there. So I tell people on my radio show, read the book of Matthew. It is the first book in the New Testament. It's about 2/3 of the way through your Bible. It is the easiest read that you will ever read, and it is truly a beautiful thing to see who Jesus Christ actually was, not who the churches are and the fallible human beings who claim to represent Him, but Him Himself as written in the Gospels. And I guarantee you will fall in love with Him. He is amazing. And the book of Matthew, I think, is the best introduction to the Bible.
Well, I agree with you, and I concur that all 66 are amazing, and, every bit of ancient wisdom in that Bible, I mean, it's obviously inspired by God, and it's unrolling. It's rolling out before our eyes prophetically, and if, people have their own little things to say about, I can't believe you guys, talk about Christian stuff. I mean, it's great if you're a patriot and you're just touching on this stuff, but, let's leave all the God stuff out of it. Well, I'll tell you, instead of a suicide hotline, which we hopefully don't need like Katherine didn't on her radio station, we need a hotline to heaven, and really the only way is through Christ. It's not, as Joel Osteen and Billy Graham say, well, I don't really know, Larry. I mean, it's really about Jesus Christ. That is the only way, and you're right. And if people don't kind of pull their heads out of their butts, I'm sorry to say, and kind of take a look around and snap out of their dystopic trance and see that there is no other answer, because it is scary times, and we're kind of speed railing down that right now by stealth, and I think people really need to realize this is good versus evil unfolding before our eyes, and the RFID is just part of the bigger evil, sinister picture. And the good news is, you're right, Katherine, you just nailed it. And I want to say God bless you for all your work in the past 10 years. We love your stuff. We loved having you on. Tim Ball, amazing climatologist who, of course, is Al Gore's thorn in his side. I mean, you're just amazing people that, you never stop plugging away and doing what's right. And we don't always, have dibs on what our God calling is, but we don't always pick it. And I mean, I wouldn't have picked this going down certain rabbit holes, but we do what we're called to do. And again, just God bless you. We will have all your stuff up on our website and all our Facebook affiliations. And I want to thank you so much for coming on. And again, you're such an inspiration. You're beautiful. You're patriotic. I mean, you're every man out there's dream too. On top of it, I've been getting emails all day. Oh, I love her. You're loved by. You're just adored. You have this big acolyte of followers, and again, God bless you. I love it when you're on Alex Jones. It's so nice to see a little bit of a feminine perspective. And again, we want to have you back soon, and we're definitely supporting your work. And I would encourage all our listeners, please, the least you can do with what this woman's gone through is go get yourself a copy of some of her writings or books. Get a copy of the child's book. I don't think any grandparent or parent should be without that. And again, we adore you, and we want to have you back soon, Katherine.
Can I say amen to all of that? And just to make, by the way, just to make this worthwhile, Katherine, while you were talking, I signed on to Start Page, so I'm on my way.
Oh, I'm glad you did. Yeah, and everybody makes that mistake, but the best way to remember it is start something good, or start protecting your privacy. It's Start Page, and I really hope you like it. We've found if you can stick to it for 2 weeks, then you will never look back. It's always that initial transition that's a little bit hard. People are used to seeing Google, but Start Page is you have that reassurance that you've got total privacy. So thank you. I appreciate your checking it out.
I'll get on the list for the emails too.
Well, and God help us. Let's not mistake that with that evil word "smart" with the smart meter, smart TV. Let's not mistake that for a Smart Page. But anyway, Katherine, again, it's just such an honor, such a privilege. We have so many. We've got a wall of lineup of calls from here to Philadelphia, and But one of the common thing was that everybody does unanimously support your work, and we're going to make sure that we inundate this out there on different sites. And everybody, I encourage you. This is it. This website is the one. And again, we won't have the transhumanists peeking in on us. So great job, Katherine, and thanks, and come back and join us soon.
All right. Bless you all. Thank you so much for the opportunity to be on your show. All right. Have a wonderful evening. Bye-bye.
Take care. Well, Tim, what an amazing woman, isn't she?
Oh, yeah. I mean, and of course, well, the thing is, your question about, do you ever get despair? And there wasn't a hint of that. And I got to admit, there are times when I say, why am I doing this? What I could have made a whole pile of money taking the oil company's money, and there's every once in a while you start to say, what's the point? But when you
could have been buddies with David Suzuki. What were you thinking, Tim?
Yeah, well, yes, exactly. But by the way, he got confronted face to face by Ezra Levant on Sun TV today.
Oh, I saw it today. I was in my glory, Tim.
Yeah, exactly. But no, I mean, Katherine, just the inspiration of she's clearly what's the term? Just caught up in it.
Oh,
you know,
yeah.
It's divine inspiration. There's no question in her mind, and then she leaves that idea in your mind, and it's really amazing. But what I particularly liked, of course, was look, there are all these things happening, but once you understand them, that helps you deal with them. But then she offers positive solutions, which is what's so desperately.
Well, because you and I, we've talked about this very phrase too, and doom and gloom, and I mean, she touched on that too, and I think, you know, she's doing a radio station, she's syndicated, she has these books, and then all of a sudden people tell her, oh, you know, I want to commit suicide. Well, I've got a lot of people that want to fling themselves over a red bridge lately too, that I won't mention any names on air, but one of my very dear and close friend who I know is listening. I mean, we're always having this conversation. You know, what does it come to when you just absolutely, you just get so inundated by, you know, it's carbon this, eco this, you know, every 5 minutes it's Big Brother this, it's spying, tracking, data mining, you know, gas prices soaring. You've got, you know, the truckers, of course. That's a bit of a glimpse of hope. And by the way, I want to thank, of course, the Haggmans. I absolutely adore the work they do. They're amazing men of God. They've been kind of like you. They've been persecuted. And these guys, there's not a day goes by these guys aren't, you know, sued and tracked and mucked with by, you know, of course, the clandestine globalists are always interfering. It's kind of par for the course. But you know, what is going on? I mean, one really good thing that we have to step back and think of, at least this trucker rally taking place October 11th to the 13th, that gives me some hope that finally people are saying, you know what, we've had enough of this.
Yeah. Well, it's like Popeye said, isn't it? That's all I can stand. I can't stand no more. and never were true words spoken. But I think one of the things that's going through my mind, listening to Katherine, and been, you know, sort of in the back of my mind, but the left, the socialism, apart from lack of God, is that it's the ultimate in selfishness, and it isn't about you, or me. It's about society, about as you said, religion, moral codes, and values in life, and that came across so profoundly with what Katherine was saying. But I was in communist countries, and I had the pleasure of talking with Václav Klaus, who was the Czech Republic president, and he was the keynote speaker at a conference I was at in New York, and his opening remark was, you know, what are you doing? We've just come through 70 years of communism, and here you are in North America heading back there. You know, I mean, you're crazy.
Well, we do have some callers, Tim. I did promise some of our callers we would try to get to calls. We, again, have a lineup of callers. And, again, let's just, before we jump on a break, let's take one caller. We've got a 914 area code. Welcome to the program. You are on the Weekend Vigilante. Go ahead, caller. Caller, are you there? Okay, we've got a 914 with their hand up, but nobody's home. Okay, let's try that. Well, my studio just blanked right out. How nice. I don't know what happened, but everything got grayed out, and I've still got a wall of calls. But anyway, with that said, I mean, Tim, when you heard those words, you know, you hear this opening speaker, he comes from that kind of a, you know, background. What was your first thoughts?
Well, it was as I talked about when the guests were on, that if what Obama was proposing was genuinely new, and that was the illusion he created, he said, well, we're going to have change. Well, it wasn't long before the bumper stickers were out there as, how's the change suiting you so far? Because, and of course, that's the great illusion for the young people that supported him, was that, this is going to be something genuinely new. And they not only find out that it's not new, but it's been tried elsewhere and failed miserably. And so he's completely dashed their young optimism. And of course, worse than that, they find that he's more political, more manipulative than any of the politicians that he's been attacking. And so it's really, really disheartening for people. And you see the numbers of support for him just plummeting. But, of course, the problem is, what has he already put in place? What has he already implemented? With, for example, with the Obamacare, the Affordable Care Act, as they're calling it. You know that was pre-prepared.
Isn't that an oxymoron? already half the people that are on it can't afford it.
Well, exactly, but you know that was already pre-prepared. They had that ready to go. That George Soros and all of those left-wing people and John Holdren and Samantha Power and Cass Sunstein, all these people, they had that document written already. And to bring in 2,000 pages that is so complex that now they've tried to implement it, it just simply won't work. What does that tell you about pre-planning and a premeditated, complete takeover and deliberately designed collapse of the U.S. economy, right, and the U.S. government? So, but the challenge, of course, for Obama was that he had to do things very quickly because the Founding Fathers, recognizing that there were people like him that were around that were going to try and take power, that there would be an election every 2 years, and they could limit megalomania to some extent. But unfortunately, as we talked about with the father and son, that Obama somehow fiddled the books, somehow wriggled around, and got reelected. And of course he gave himself away when he was talking to Medvedev, the Russian prime minister, when he said, look, tell Vladimir Putin that when I'll be have a free hand when I'm in my second term. Well, that was what was going on. And
well, you know what's also going on, Tim? I mean, let's not fall for this theatrical sort of, I think it was Doug Haggman who, there's such a great article he wrote, and he was talking about, sort of this theatrical, what we're witnessing. It's not, it's a political theatrical thing. I'll see if I can find that. But, I mean, don't be fooled, people. This is not a left and right and, Democratic versus Republic. I mean, forget all that. No. I mean, you're seeing this, this complete globally orchestrated government shutdown. It's all smoke and mirrors. They're massively dumping property. I mean, there's no volume in bonds or stocks. I mean, this is all this huge, it's like a stagnation bubble. It's just the middle class, let's face it, Tim, it's not going, it's gone.
Yep.
I mean, they're rape, pillaging, plundering, destroying the middle class. And I really think we're a complete nation under judgment, because when you look at the complete destruction of the middle class, you look at this Obamacare draconian legislation. I mean, forget IRS and Benghazi and forget all the sci-fi horror executive orders. You've got vilified vets, you've got Christians being persecuted. I mean, let's just kind of take a macro view and step back and really look at all these globally orchestrated things that are going on. I mean, how the powers that be can control the planned demolition of the entire nation and creating sort of this volatility to continue to pilfer, plunder, pillage. You pick your P word. Wow, that was hard to say.
But the thing is, Sheila, though, that the middle class, and Obama knows they're the key. He keeps pretending to play to them. But in fact, as you said, particularly with Obamacare, they're going to get hit the hardest. But Obama's not doing it because he cares about the middle class. He cares about it because he knows they are the ones, they are the 20% that can swing between the left and the right and determine who's in power. And so if you eliminate them, then the chances of a counter-revolution, because it's always the middle class that lead the revolution.
Let's take another caller here, Tim. Let's take another caller here. We've got a 313 area code. We've got a 415. We've got a 661. 661, welcome to the program. We'll try that again. 661, welcome to the program.
Hello.
Hi.
Oh, hi. Really enjoying this program, Sheila and Tim. It's been wonderful. I was wondering if there is legislation in BC that protects consumers from having RFID chips in their clothing. I think I saw that one person was buying some pants from Walmart in the States, and they were being tracked with the RFID coding. And is that allowed in this province? Do you know that?
Well, actually, interesting you should mention that. And again, I think Tim touched on something. And it's a great question. I think Tim touched on something really important, too, and this is something I'm trying to do right now, is lobbying the BC government under the Privy Council and also under the we actually have a Ministry of technology that has a little thing called people tracking unit, which is really interesting that I'll bring up on a later show. But anyway, I'm lobbying them for legislation to come out with how they can just arbitrarily combine this card. They're planning on chipping it. So I've got a whole bunch of information I'm trying to get out to, Canadians, to give them a heads up to say, listen, and again, I think it's Katherine Albrecht that put it so well. Your little device stops where my purchase begins. And we have the right to know as consumers what's going into our product. I mean, is that kind of a pie-in-the-sky ideology maybe? But like I said, I've been kind of single-handedly working on that myself to try to figure out how we can stop these kind of things. And I know if you go on Dr. Albrecht's website, she's got some very interesting, although it's American-based legislation, how you can, really put pressure on your MLAs, your member of legislative parliament. I don't know if people in the States know that, but we have MLAs and we also have different kind of representation. You can go to your municipalities. There's lots of things you can do. You can be talking to your MPs, your members of parliament. You could be doing a lot of things to really put the pressure on to say, listen, we're not putting up with this tracking, spying, data mining. We're not putting up with this Orwellian nightmare anymore.
Sheila, can I just I checked into, and to my knowledge, there's no legislation against putting RFIDs into things. And one of the things that happened to me, it was about 3 or 4 months ago now, and it's made me very suspicious. But I bought a couple of T-shirt or sweaters or sort of thing at the Bay, and I walked out and it set off the alarm, and I went back in and found a clerk, and she said, no, there's nothing, there's no tag on your shirt, and so that was fine. I went home, I wore the shirt, went back into the Bay, and the alarm went off again. I discovered that the device, which of course is ostensibly to stop you stealing, shoplifting, was sewn right into the seam of the product. And that instead of cutting it off or removing it, as you know, they used to do with the tags, they just simply negate it at the cash register. And the person who sold me the items forgot to cancel it out. But just because they cancel it out in terms of setting off the stealing alarm, does that mean there isn't other information in that tag that's now built into the seam of my clothing that they can track? So I think that's already occurring.
Wow, that is so interesting. I guess that's what they do when you purchase something and you see them run the product over the counter. I guess they're deactivating it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But what part of it are they deactivating? Are they just deactivating right the part that sets off the alarm? But the actual information is still in it and going out to their trackers.
Absolutely. Well, there would be a good market if somebody could develop something that could detect it, and people like us could buy one of those and detect these RFIDs and cancel them out ourselves.
Oh, exactly. Yeah.
Well, I want to bring people's attention. I really want to jump in and just quickly bring in people's attentions to these new kids now that are upgrading their iPhone 5S. I think that stands for iPhone 5 Satan myself. But what it does is it actually can thumbprint you. It does this kind of scan over your. You can program it to do a sort of facial recognition. It comes with all these very creepy Big Brother things where now police can also, force you to put your hand now, your thumbprint on there. They have a way now they can run it through there. I mean, it is just spooky what you can do with your iPhones, and they're all sort of gradually teaching people how to love their little servitude and, whip out the little, scan your movie ticket. You don't even need cash or even your wallet for that matter anymore. You can just scan your iPhone over your little movie ticket or your purchase. Like Gucci has that set up where you go in, forget your wallet, you've just got your phone, you scan it. So it just makes so much sense that we're going to inevitably see this jump from forget your phone, let's fire it in your hand now. Because, after all, everybody's got a forehead and a hand, I think. Well, unless if you don't have a hand, I know you've got a forehead. So how much easier is it to springboard it into people's hand and forehead under the guise of, well, we're just trying to, prevent identity theft, of course.
Yeah. Well, the other issue, of course. Sorry. Go ahead, caller.
Oh, I was just going to say that, I wonder if the more expensive you go up the line, like $200-300 pair of running shoes, $300 pair of jeans, if there's even more tracking information sewn in there. I mean, they have the time and the leisure probably to put even more data in. So like Katherine was saying, you'll keep track of when you take out the lid off the toothpaste. Well, they'll keep track where those pants go, where they go to dinner, where they can market to those pair of pants that's $300.
Well, and Caller, you just touched on something, because you actually, if you read her book Spy Chips, and again I encourage everybody to grab a copy, it's an amazing read, and although it was written in 2006, it's reading more like a newspaper right now, but get a copy of it, because it goes through the companies that are involved and sort of how this is all developed. I mean, of course, we don't have 10 hours to talk about how this emerged and what companies are doing it, but it's a very extensive compilation of information, and they poured through hours of documents they weren't even supposed to have access to, and they found amazing things. And again, you have these sinister companies like, it's all the Madison Avenue, Hollywood, pushing the trendy, Apple, IBM. You have all these sort of course, you got Microsoft in the mix too, because of course Mr. Bill Gates, Mr. Eugenics had to be in the mix too. So it's really interesting how they've sort of conglomerated all this stuff into these easy, go get your little reader card and get your little discount card too. And it's amazing the volumes of data they have on each and every one of the people.
That is so interesting. And I just wanted to say before I get off the line here that, Tim Ball, I really admire your courage for getting out there and doing what you do. I mean, it must be so tempting sometimes just to go away on a deserted island and forget about all this, but you
Amen.
are taking that stand. You are out there in the forefront, like Sheila often mentions. Our forefathers would, be doing, gritty forefathers would be fighting the fight, but you are doing that, and I just take my hat off to you and want you to know that I really appreciate what you're doing for all of us.
I really appreciate that, because sometimes you do start to question yourself. But my biggest concern all along is has it affected or damaged my family? I know that I've been filed with so many lawsuits now that if somebody comes to the door at 4 o'clock on a Friday, my wife starts... Really, the sheriff, that's when they deliver. And my wife starts to quake about that. But, one of the things that why I appreciate your comments so much is that a lot of people have no idea just how nasty, if you threaten the people in power or push back, how really nasty it can get. And I can understand why people just say, if the world wants to be fooled, let it be fooled. But unfortunately, I got that bone of no, I'm not going to be pushed around. I'm not going to be give in to this, and I'm going to keep speaking for the truth. And so I really appreciate your comments. And by the way, it's also the same way that in the early days where I got 40 nasty emails and maybe one good one, and that one good one kept me going. But that has changed. And comments like yours I'm getting much, much more frequently, and I think that it's a very good sign that people are starting to listen, so I really appreciate your comments.
Well,
yes, thank you, caller. What an articulate, wonderful woman you are.
Well, I just wanted to say that, and if there was any way I could support you, I would certainly do that. You should have some sort of line where we can support these people that are out there in the forefront, all of you. Sheila, too, what you're doing is just amazing. So thank you for standing up for all of us, because we just need a voice, and you guys are doing it. So
thank you.
And just actually to let our caller know, and again, we only have 9 minutes to wrap it up, and we've got the Proof Negative show coming by, of course. But Dr. Tim, give out your website, and of course, Tim and I are working on a book, Debate Me Al, and it's going to be a barn burner because, of course, these eco-bullies aren't talking about the 17-year cooling trend. So it'll be a very interesting read when it does come out. We've also got a website developer working on the Weekend Vigilante. But give out your website, Tim, and how people can support you, because just like Katherine Albrecht, you have been such a tremendous freedom lover, a fighter. You've been sued, you've been attacked, you've been manipulated by these guys, and you will not shut up, and you've been mad as hell, and you're not going to take it anymore. And I just absolutely adore the way we all admire, and of course we get this frequently, as I always tell you. I said, my co-host gets all these wonderful things, and occasionally I actually do too, but I mean, I have not earned the tremendous respect that I have for you as a person who's taken on Al Gore, you've taken on the climate issue, you've stood up when you were told to shut up, sit down, sit in the corner, how dare you question your government, and we do admire that, Tim, and again, just God bless you for doing that.
Yeah, well, my website is drtimball.com, that's drtimball.com, and a lot of it is about the climate, but it's also about other issues that they're going to start exploiting, like water is the one that's coming down the pike, and we've talked a little bit about that. We need to talk about it more, particularly here in British Columbia, where the Columbia River Treaty is up for renewal. And so Dr. Timball, drtimball.com, and so I really appreciate that. Also, you know, if anybody wants to email me, my email address is there, and I'll try and answer your questions. Because I think that one of the things that annoys me is that they take people's weaknesses and exploit them. They take people's lack of understanding of the way the earth works and the way systems work. And the more I can help people understand, they're less likely to be taken advantage of. But the other thing I wanted to comment about, Sheila, is that one of the things I've learned is that, and it was why Obama had to expose himself a little bit, because he had so little time to do what he wanted to do.
Yes.
And normally these people work by gradualism. It's just little change here, little change there, and that's really the message from Catherine. And then all of a sudden, you know, wow, look what's happened. It's like with Alberta, you know, they got a project going to divert all their water from the north to the south. And, and of course, it was completely against the law, the Natural Resources and the British North America Act, and the Lougheed government said, okay, we're going to stop it. It was called the Prime Project. We're going to cancel it. We won't do it anymore. And then somebody, fortunately, bless those whistleblowers, leaked some cabinet documents where they said, look, we won't call it that anymore. We won't talk about it. And what we'll do is we'll do it piecemeal. And then all of a sudden, when it's done, we'll say, oh my goodness, look, the Prime Project. Oh, we didn't mean that to happen. That's how they do these things. It's a little bit at a time. Gradualism.
Yeah, gradualism. Well, and if water was the 21st century, let's face it, you got T. Boone Pickens out there. I mean, I always say if water was the new oil, he'd be the new modern-day John D. Rockefeller. But you've got, you know, them buying up more water rights. You've got these conglomerates and globalist elites, these clandestine groups buying up, you know, the Nestle's, the Monsantos. You got them buying up water. I mean, it's
in Canada,
isn't it?
Sheila, here in Canada, you got Maud Barlow. Right?
Don't even get me started on that.
Well, I know she's been on the water issue. She's been on the water issue for a long time, so I've said that it's going to be the climate or the resource issue of the 21st century, and not because it needs to be, but because as the climate issue fails. And by the way, what's beautiful about the climate issue is that Mother Nature is not playing along. Mother Nature's supposed to be warming, and she's cooling.
You mean Gaia doesn't have a fever anymore? Mother Gaia has lost her fever?
No.
But I mean, I really would encourage listeners today. I mean, definitely support. You know, go get a copy of Spy Chips. We had an amazing Dr. Katherine Albrecht talking about this. She's really been the forerunner on coming out against RFID. I mean, you know, again, you've got Haggman's. I mean, just these bios alone on these people and what they've done and what they've exposed, and you know, just their roles in how they've helped people. I'm tired, Tim, of armchair patriots. I'm tired of the little keyboard patriots that, you know, we're actually sticking out our neck. We're putting our lives on the line here. We try to get the information to the people. I mean, it's the least they can do is, try to support some of these people's work. And again, I always say, your cowardice is going to kill you, people, because it is time. I mean, the truckers are a good example. They're rolling out today and heading to D.C. It's hammering down. They're going to swoop in like a, swarm of locusts, motorized locusts on D.C. and try to look at this money machine and try to stand up for the Constitution. But, the talking time is over. It's time for action, people, and I really want to encourage people, get out there, support these truckers. Don't spend any money from the next, from today till the 13th, or go get what you can today, and don't spend any money from the 11th to the 13th. You don't have to be driving a Kenworth to support this, and I'll tell you, our gritty forefathers did a lot more than just sit around talking about it. Can you imagine if they had to go to the market that day that, it just happened to be that they were fighting for, 1776 is a good example of this, and it just really makes me, I think probably my grandfather would roll in his grave if he sees the passivity going on today that, all of them, they were gunned down to apply the blanket of freedom that everybody enjoys today, but nobody steps back and thinks about that, Tim.
Yeah, but I totally agree with what you said, but I think we've got to be careful because not everybody wants to be active. They're not necessarily passive, and they don't necessarily know how to be involved. But there's that old saying, they also serve who only stand and wait. And just by not participating, not being fooled by these things, that when these hucksters come around, you just look at them and say, sorry, I'm not listening to you. I know you're a huckster. And just by that action, that passive resistance, which Gandhi showed and which Jesus showed, was so powerful. I think that's how those people. Because as I said, I understand. It's like Toastmasters say. The only thing a person fears worse than the public speaking is death. And so it isn't for everybody that they're going to be an activist or get out there and stand up. And I understand that. But as I said, what bothers me is when they go along like sheep with what's going on.
And the other thing you got to remember, I guess, but you got to remember too, is Thomas, and as we run out of time here, we've got 3 seconds here left. I mean, Thomas Jefferson really did say it best when he said that, really if you look around and you think about what's the tyrannical sort of thing that's marching in his mock speed. I mean, all tyranny needs to gain a foothold is for people of good conscience to remain silent. I think, that's where we're at that pivotal Rubicon or precipice, if you will. But anyway, I want to encourage everybody. I really appreciate all our listeners. We had a wall of calls. We had an amazing dynamite 2 guests. We had some heavy hitters there. And I want to encourage everybody to now join the Weekend Vigilante every Thursday from 3 o'clock to 6 o'clock Pacific Central Time, of course, Pacific Standard Time. That's 7 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. And again, I want to encourage everybody to support Katherine Albrecht's work. We'll give out all that information again on our site. And stay tuned for the Proof Negative show. And again, thank you, everyone that emailed questions in. Take care.
We have before us the opportunity to forge for ourselves and for future generations a new world order.
I don't know. I just don't know when exactly.
I certainly did not know anything.
There was no knowledge here at the White House.
This is a globally orchestrated meltdown.